Chapter 344. In Chang, and handmaiden Sang Sang only had two friends she could talk to. One was Liu, the princess of the Tang Empire, and the other was Xiao Xiao, Mistress Jian's personal handmaiden. The status of the princess of the Tang Empire and the handmaidens of the brothel were worlds apart. However, Sang Sang's attitude towards them was the same. She was always silent and played the role of a listener. Xiao Xiao gently patted the railing twice, looked at Sang Sang beside her, and asked curiously, "I've heard of the calligraphy addict. I think she's one of the 3 addicts in the world. Since I've heard of her, she must be very famous. Is she beautiful?" Sang Sang nodded. Xiao Xiao angrily said, "Men are really bad." Sang Sang looked at her in confusion. Xiao Xiao emphasized and explained, "I mean your young master." Sang Sang was even more confused. Xiao Xiao looked at her and said anxiously, "Now everyone in Chang and knows that Ning Ke brought back a beautiful woman from a long journey. Aren't you worried at all?" Sang Sang looked at her and asked seriously, "What should I worry about?" Xiao Xiao held her hand and said worriedly, "According to what you usually say, you often sleep with your young master, so it's definitely impossible for you to marry someone else. In the future, you will definitely become his concubine. In the end, he didn't even tell you before bringing a woman home. It seems that he doesn't have any feelings for you. In the future, if that woman marries your young master and becomes the mistress of the household, what will you do?" Sang Sang looked down at her hands that were tightly holding the railing. After a long silence, she said softly, "Young master is getting old and needs to get married. When I first came to your brothel with him, we had been discussing who is suitable to be the mistress. So even if he wants to marry Miss Calligraphy Addict, I won't feel anything. You want them dead? Which part of them are you thinking about? Or do you want them dead? After struggling in the wilderness for more than half a year, you come to the brothel instead of studying in the academy after returning to Chang, and I really don't know how the headmaster and eldest brother have taught you. Are you really going to live in a mortal world for the rest of your life?" Mistress Jian stared at Ning Ke in front of her with dissatisfaction written all over her broad forehead. Ning Ke stood there obediently and did not dare to argue. The woman in front of him was not an ordinary woman, not to mention that she controlled the rules of the brothel in Chang, and which was equivalent to controlling his sexual happiness. He did not dare to be the slightest bit presumptuous because of the vague relationship between her youngest uncle and the academy. After the trip to the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine and listening to Lien Sheng's memories, he was sure that the girl named Xiao Xiao, who died tragically in front of the Lang Temple, had something to do with the House of Red Sleeves. Youngest uncle had destroyed the Devil's Doctrine because of the girl's death. Second brother had said that youngest uncle and Aunt Jian were close. What had happened between them? He could have asked Mistress Jian about the girl named Xiao Xiao, but he thought that it was a sad story of the past. He didn't want to make the elders sad again, so he didn't mention it. He suddenly thought that Aunt Jian should be very interested in the news of youngest uncle. So he said, "I have inherited youngest uncle's legacy." Mistress Jian was slightly startled and asked in a trembling voice, "Howren sword?" Ning Ke nodded and answered, "Yes." Mistress Jian looked at him in disbelief and then frowned deeply. She leaned forward slightly and stared into his eyes. She asked very seriously, "Only the Howren sword?" Ning Ke was startled and then nodded again. Mistress Jian suddenly felt relaxed when she got his confirmation. She leaned back tiredly and said, "That's good." Ning Ke looked at her expression and thought that maybe Aunt Jian also knew the truth of youngest uncle's joining the devil. "I don't want you to follow his old path." Mistress Jian looked at him and said earnestly, "If you want the world to admit that you're qualified to represent the academy and enter the human realm, you have to go through a lot of training." When he entered Chang, and on a little black donkey, he was just a little scholar in a green robe. But because he couldn't control his mind, he caused a lot of trouble in the world and finally died without a burial place. So you must remember to keep a low profile this time and don't offend too many people. This was the second time that Ning Ke heard Mistress Jian seriously mention the word "enter the human realm" in today's conversation. He couldn't help but feel confused and wondered what it was. Then he heard that she used youngest uncle to warn him, so he couldn't help but smile and replied, "Don't worry, I'm not as strong as youngest uncle. If there's any trouble, I can just hide in the academy. Don't think that the academy is really the best in the world. If the academy can really solve everything in the world, how could your youngest uncle end up like that? What's the point of cutting all the peach blossoms on the mountain afterward? Mistress Jian said coldly, and the wrinkles at the corner of her eyes were full of resentment. That was resentment against the academy and even against the headmaster of the academy. According to the law of the Tang Empire, students of the academy were not allowed to join the army after graduation. Therefore, unlike most of the officials in the imperial court who came from the academy and had a close relationship with the academy, the military of the Tang Empire had always been estranged from the academy. Especially recently, the powerful figures in the military, represented by the Defender General of the state Su Shi, had even developed a strong vigilance against the academy, especially those super mundane people in the back of the mountain of the academy. What made this vigilance a reality was a memorial from Tuyang City. In the memorial, the Defender General of the military, Xia Ho, who had made great achievements in the war, earnestly requested to retire. His words were full of fatigue and discouragement. After seeing this memorial, many generals in the military ministry felt sad, especially the bigwigs at the top. They knew that before Xia Ho decided to retire, Mr. First and Mr. 13 of the academy went to Tuyang City and had a long talk with Xia Ho in the winter courtyard. Therefore, they became even angrier. Many people in the military of the Tang Empire did not like Xia Ho, but they insisted that it was the military's own problem. Even if Xia Ho was to be punished, it should be handled by His Majesty or the imperial court, and not by the academy. As for Xia Ho being a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace, it was not a big deal in the eyes of the Tangs who were also believers of Hao Yin. Of course, no one dared to suspect the headmaster of the academy. It was just that the headmaster of the academy had not appeared in the human world for many years, and even His Majesty had not seen him for a long time. Therefore, the military thought that it was the fault of the back of the mountain of the academy. I believe that if the headmaster of the academy knew about this, he would not allow those people in the back of the mountain to act so unscrupulously. Su Shi said coldly, "Cultivators should cultivate and not interfere with the politics of the court. Just like the two unknown places, deep in the mountains or the wilderness, those outside the world return to the outside world, and those inside the world return to the inside world. Why should they be connected? Why should they enter the human world? How was the investigation of that case?" He asked. "There is indeed an iron nail in the head of Censor Zhang Yiqi." The Chang and local government protected the evidence well, but they did not continue the investigation at that time. When Xianwei General Chen Zixian died in the iron shop, the old brushpin shop was not open that day. In the early morning after the death of the former military ministry document appraiser Yan Suqing, the Yulin Royal Guards found a piece of cloth deliberately left by the murderer and found a coat in another yard. Because it was a ready-made garment from the lawn embroidery workshop, this clue could not be traced. However, according to the investigation of the murder scene and the wound on the coat, it can be confirmed that the murderer was seriously injured. A military ministry official said, 2 days after Yan Suqing's death, it was the semester examination of the academy. According to the student's memory, Ning Ke had made an appointment with Xie Qiyun, a scholar of the South Jin Kingdom, to bet on the result of the examination. However, he asked for 2 consecutive days of leave at that time. This matter caused an uproar in the academy, so it could not be faked. Su Shi said coldly, "Of course he had to ask for leave when he was seriously injured. The military of the Tang Empire was extremely powerful. Once they started a comprehensive investigation of something, they would instantly show extremely strong action and high efficiency. It did not take them a long time to find out so many clues, which was really terrifying. These seemingly inconspicuous clues were like a net, faintly pointing to a vague figure. It seemed to indicate that Ning Ke, a student of the second floor of the academy, had something to do with those murder cases. Nothing can stand up to suspicion, because once you start to suspect, you can seek evidence. As long as you seek evidence, you can find a lot of evidence. Otherwise, who would believe that the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy turned out to be a cold-blooded murderer? Su Shi said expressionlessly. I don't want to know the connection behind these murder cases. I don't want to know who Ning Ke was and what kind of hatred he had with the deceased. I just want to confirm that he did not violate the law of the Tang Empire. After thinking for a moment, the official shook his head and said, the existing evidence is not enough to prove anything. Su Shi frowned slightly and seemed to be a little worried. The official looked at him in confusion and asked in a low voice, actually, even if we really find evidence of Ning Ke's involvement in the case, can we really go to the back of the mountain of the academy to arrest him for trial? General, in my humble opinion, let's just forget about this matter. Su Shi looked at the winter sun outside the window and said slowly, the headmaster of the academy once said that the law of the Tang Empire is the most important. Our Tang Empire is strong and prosperous according to this principle. If the academy breaks the law, it will be the same as the common people. Even if we can't find evidence of Ning Ke violating the law of the Tang Empire, we have to let the headmaster of the academy know about this matter and make Ning Ke unable to be the wayfarer of the academy. After a moment of silence, he said coldly, now it seems that my vigilance towards Ning Ke is indeed right. If the future nation master is such a villain, how can the Tang Empire be at peace? If those foreign cultivators have already entered Chang, and tell them to provide convenience for them. Tell the Yuan royal guards not to easily try to stop the battle between the two sides. The official from the military ministry trembled slightly and expressed his opposition without hesitation. He said, I object. Even if Ning Ke is a villain, he is after all a Tang man. How can we deal with him by using the hands of foreign people? Su Shi turned around and looked at him with slight mockery. He said, do you think I'm such a shameless fool? The official from the military ministry was fearless and replied, I dare not, so I don't understand the meaning of your words. Since we're going to enter the human realm, we have to be tempered. Ku Haoran was like this in the past, and Ning Ke is the same now. I just want this kind of tempering to be fairer. I believe the academy will not have any objection to my arrangement. Su Shi said coldly, if Ning Ke is guilty, of course he should be punished by the law of the Tang Empire. But now there is no evidence that he has violated the law of the Tang Empire. So I really want him to lose again and again until he finally loses all his courage and edges. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 345. Ning Ke did not know that he had become the hero in the novel and was about to face the challenges of countless supporting roles. He would either win or lose and finally decide whether he was the hero or not, like Long Qing, who was supposed to be the hero but ended up as a side character. After returning to Chang and from the wilderness, he had been thinking about an important problem. If he could not solve that problem, he would not even dare to cultivate in the back of the mountain of the academy, let alone fight with others. In order to solve this important problem, early the next morning, or to be exact, when it was still dark, he used the waste token of the visiting professor of the Imperial Center Administration to leave Chang. He came to the mountain road behind the old library of the academy and waited quietly. At the moment when the morning light appeared in the east, the clouds on the mountain road gradually dispersed. Eldest brother, who was wearing an old coat and straw sandals, slowly walked out. He was surprised to see Ning Ke, who was leaning against the tree and yawning. Ning Ke bowed and asked, Senior brother, where are you going today? Eldest brother smiled and said, I've been traveling with my teacher for the past 2 years and did not know that the imperial court had dredged a large lake under the Yanming Mountain in the south of Chang'an. I went there yesterday. The air in the lake was fresh and the water under the ice was clear. There were also fishermen breaking the ice to catch fish. I like it very much, so I'm going to see it again today. Ning Ke had a lot of experience in dealing with eldest brother's speaking speed and verbosity. His ears could automatically filter out the nonsense about scenery and mood and capture the only useful words. However, he did not find any key point in eldest brother's words. He said angrily, Senior brother, I have a question to ask you. Eldest brother was slightly startled and asked, Is it very troublesome? I still want to see the lake. How about another day? Ning Ke said firmly, not another day. It can only be today. Is it long? It can be long or short. Youngest brother, if it is a riddle, then it is not interesting. Eldest brother, am I such a boring person? After a short conversation, eldest brother and youngest brother began to climb the long mountain road. This important question is, I wanted to ask you when we were roasting potatoes by the bonfire in the wilderness, but you said not to. You will ask the headmaster of the academy when you return, but the headmaster of the academy has not returned. Why do I feel that this sentence is also a riddle? Ning Ke stopped in front of the winter trees that had stabbed him all over. After a long silence, he looked at eldest brother and nodded. He said as calmly as possible, I have inherited youngest uncle's mantle at the front gate of the devil's doctrine. In Lotus's words, I have joined the devil, and I am sure that there is something wrong with my body. A gust of winter wind blew past. Eldest brother looked at a ginkgo leaf on the mountain path, which was twisting in the wind. After a long silence, he withdrew his gaze and nodded at him. He smiled and said, I know. Ning Ke looked at his eyes nervously and waited for what would happen next. However, eldest brother did not do or say anything. He just smiled and shook his head, and then continued to walk up the mountain path. You knew I was possessed by the devil? And then what? Ning Ke looked at his senior brother's back and shouted in confusion. The eldest brother set in. Eldest to know, to brother said. I know. Eldest to catch to Ning to uncle. Ning, academy, eldest academy to say. Ning emperor academy to Ning to eldest academy to sure Quebec Ning in academy and by academy. Ning Ke chased up and asked angrily, Senior brother, did you hear that? What are the rules of the academy? The eldest brother sighed and said, the back cliff was used by the headmaster to imprison youngest uncle. You haven't caused as much trouble as he did. You're not guilty enough, so you're not qualified to be imprisoned there. Ning Ke was stunned and asked, then what should we do? Eldest brother looked at him and said seriously, wait for the headmaster to come back. Ning Ke asked, what if the headmaster never comes back? Eldest brother patted him on the shoulder and said, then we will pretend that we don't know, okay? At this time, the two of them had already walked to the wooden door and walked past the stone that was deeply rooted in the mountain. Ning Ke seriously thought for a long time, but still could not understand what eldest brother's attitude was. He could not understand why eldest brother did not react as he expected to such an important matter. The wooden door that could block cultivators below the see-through realm opened without any wind in front of the two people. Eldest brother took out a silk handkerchief and slowly wiped a small bronze mirror clean. Then he put it back into his sleeve. I heard that you went to the House of Red Sleeves to see Aunt Jin yesterday. Yes, she's also a woman with a hard life. Ning Ke saw the small bronze mirror, but he did not know what eldest brother had done with it. The two finally reached the highest peak of the back mountain of the academy. Ning Ke stood on the edge of the cliff and looked at the sea of clouds under his feet. He felt the cold wind blowing on his face and recalled the scenery of that night. He could not help but feel slightly shaken. Eldest brother stood beside him and looked at the sea of clouds and the winter sun. He said slowly, the trip to the wilderness is a trial. You performed well and can officially represent the academy to enter the human realm. I think you'd better be mentally prepared. This was the third time Ning Ke heard about entering the human realm in the past 2 days. He looked at eldest brother uneasily. Although he did not understand what entering the human realm meant, he vaguely felt that it was a very troublesome thing. Senior brother, what is entering the human realm? Entering the human realm means returning to the human realm. Ning Ke asked confusedly. Cultivators go through a lot of hardships to be born into the human realm. Why do they enter the human realm? Eldest brother smiled and said, because cultivators also need to eat. This reason was very strong, because there was nothing more important than eating in this world. However, Ning Ke still could not understand the logic behind it. With the ability of cultivators, how could they not be able to make a living? Moreover, what did cultivators need to eat have anything to do with the academy? What did it have to do with the academy entering the human realm? Eldest brother looked at the sea of clouds beneath his feet and said, "Cultivation is a very extravagant thing. Regardless of whether it is the creation of natal items or other things, they all require a lot of resources. Take your primordial 13 arrows as an example. The bow and arrows need special iron and refined steel, which requires extremely precious ores. Why didn't anyone in the cultivation world create similar bows and arrows in the past? On one hand, it is because they lack the wonderful ideas in your mind and the admirable practical spirit of fourth brother and sixth brother. More importantly, they're not like our academy, which has the minds of the entire Tang Empire for us to use. You have to know that your bow and arrows can only be made a few times." Ninkei knew that the materials needed to make the primordial 13 arrows were very special and rare. However, when the bow and arrows were made, it was fourth brother and sixth brother who were responsible for the specific planning. He did not know that such a bow and arrows needed the resources of the entire Tang Empire. He could not help but be stunned. He suddenly asked, "Are the other unknown places also entering the human realm? I think Tang and Yi Su seem to be wandering in the human realm and have nothing to do with the human realm." The Shinkong Temple is supported by many Buddhist temples. The Jisho Abbey has the West Hill Divine Palace in the human realm. The West Hill Divine Palace is supported by the believers of the world. Most of the world's resources are in the hands of Haotian Taoism, and there is only one academy in the world. This academy is in the southern suburbs of Chang and on the land under our feet. It can continue to exist because it is supported by the entire Tang Empire. It is said that the academy is the only holy land that connects the two worlds. In fact, apart from the fact that the headmaster likes to be close to the human realm, the most important reason is that we can only survive if we appear in the human realm. A gust of strong wind blew through the mountains, blowing away the drifting clouds in front of the cliff, revealing the fertile farmland covered in snow below. Indistinctly, the outlines of a few villages could be seen. It was indeed a beautiful world. Eldest brother pointed to that place and said with emotion, "Look at the great rivers and mountains. We cultivators don't produce, but we consume things that ordinary people can't imagine in a lifetime. In fact, we're supported by the most ordinary farmers and miners in these villages, so we should do something for them." Ninkei looked at the distant human realm below the cliff and asked absent-mindedly, "Then what should we do for them?" "Don't worry, younger brother. The so-called entry into the human realm is just to maintain the connection between the academy and the human realm. It is not a very troublesome thing. You just need to remember that we have to protect the order and peace of the Tang Empire. So we have to remember the principle that the law of the Tang Empire comes first. Then we have to represent the Tang Empire and the academy in the process of this world. You have already taken the first step in the wilderness. Then, when someone comes to challenge you, you need to protect the dignity of the Tang Empire and the academy. Ow. To put it simply, you have to defeat everyone who dares to challenge you." Ninkei was shocked and said, "So simple and violent." Eldest brother said, "The Tao addict has returned to the West Hill. She told people that you are the person with the most similar cultivation philosophy to her. As far as I know, the little girl has always believed that the purpose of cultivation is to fight. Younger brother, do you also think so?" After thinking about it, Ninkei was sure that Yi Hongyu was right. He was that kind of person. Eldest brother said, "Then isn't fighting the most simple and violent thing in the world?" Ninkei looked at the gradually closing cloud eyebrows in front of the cliff and frowned. He said, "I always feel that something is wrong. Do I have to fight with anyone who comes to challenge me?" Eldest brother sighed and said, "It is indeed not appropriate. Unfortunately, the academy is very different from the Jisho Abbey and the Shinkong Temple. No one knows where the Jisho Abbey and the Shinkong Temple are, but all the cultivators in the world know where the academy is. Therefore, we can't travel around the world freely like Yi Su and Tang. We can only wait here passively." "Wait a minute. Why do I feel that something is wrong?" Ninkei said, "Eldest brother, you always play outside with the headmaster. I have never seen anyone enter the back of the mountain. Then where did those who wanted to challenge the academy go?" Eldest brother explained seriously. They were all killed by youngest uncle. Ninkei was stunned for a long time. He asked, "What about the years after youngest uncle?" Youngest uncle's prestige is still there, and each generation is the previous generation. Do you mean that I'm the youngest uncle of this generation? Because you have inherited youngest uncle's mantle. Ninkei shook his head and asked with some uncertainty, "Do you mean that the so-called people who enter the human realm are the thugs that the Academy uses to keep the peace? If anyone dares to cause trouble in Chong, I have to kill him?" Younger brother, you can understand it this way. But thug is a little inappropriate. It is probably similar to the front gate protector of the Buddhism sect that Lotus used to be. You have to know that it is really an enviable thing to inherit youngest uncle's mantle. After a moment of silence, Ninkei said seriously, "Bluff." Eldest brother, continue bluffing. Sob, sob, sob. Thank you very much for your votes. I can't repay you. Then I will write another chapter, sob, sob, sob. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 346. Eldest brother did not understand what Ninkei meant, but Ninkei had been fooled by him to the point of bitterness and sorrow, which had condensed into malice. He wished he could steal the cudgel on second brother's head and knock him out to vent his anger. He thought to himself, "You and the headmaster of the academy are sightseeing outside every day, while the others in the back mountain are playing the zither, playing the flute, enjoying the flowers, and playing chess. They are living such a happy life, but you throw me, the youngest disciple, into the outside world to suffer in the bitter wind and rain. What's the reason for this?" Now that he thought about it, the academy changed the real world to the wilderness, and he had to enter the front gate of the devil's doctrine to inherit the mantle of youngest uncle. Ninkei shouted with grief and indignation, "This is a trap." Eldest brother said with a smile, "What do you mean by that?" Ninkei said angrily, "Why can't other senior brothers and sisters do? Why do I have to be the one to enter the human realm?" Eldest brother sighed and said sincerely, "You know Bei Gong and the others. They spend all day in the mountains and forests, obsessed with the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, smithing, and talisman Taoism. They know nothing about the world and are as naive as children. It's not suitable for them to enter the human realm, unless you want them to be beaten badly and come back crying in less than 2 days. What about second brother? He's so strong. Jun Mo, he seems to abide by the ancient etiquette and is very upright, but he's too much of a gentleman. He doesn't know how to deal with the situation and is easily forced to the point of no return. His character is a little bit." At this point, eldest brother paused for a while and then said with a bitter smile, "He's a little stupid, and he admires youngest uncle too much. If he really enters the human realm, he might really set off a bloody storm in Chang'an." Ninkei asked again, "What about Chun Pippi? He's the youngest in the knowing destiny state. If he were to be paraded on the street, he would immediately frighten all the guys who dare to challenge the academy. There's no need to do anything. He's much more suitable than me. 12th brother's background is a little special, so it's not suitable for him to represent the academy." Eldest brother looked at Ninkei and said, "Youngest brother, you're different. You have the strongest aura of the human world, so you can't be at ease in the mountain like us. So you're the most suitable for entering the human realm. This is also the lucky chance I told you in the wilderness. Don't talk about those useless things." Ninkei said angrily, "Senior brother has said so much, and I finally understand the main point. But you mean that I have seen too many deaths in my life and have rich fighting experience. My heart has been soaked in dirty water for many years. I am not as naive as other senior brothers and sisters. Instead, I am very insidious. And I am not as honest as second brother. I am slippery and shameless. Most importantly, I am not as special as Chin Pippi and have good backer. Although this is the truth, I really don't think so. Moreover, this matter is really not as troublesome as you think." Eldest brother said honestly, but he did not know that his honesty had hurt Ninkei a second time. Junior martial uncle has also walked this path before. Back then, he rode that little black donkey in a chong, in city and defeated 37 powerful cultivators in the world. He caused a lot of trouble. Who has he been afraid of? Ninkei was not inspired by these words at all. Compared with the legendary junior martial uncle who had single-handedly destroyed the Devil's Doctrine, he felt that he was not even a hair. How could he have the confidence to cause trouble? He suddenly thought of an idea and asked, "If the enemy is too strong, will the academy help me?" Eldest brother said seriously, "If the enemy challenges you face to face and challenges you to a duel, the academy can't afford to lose face." Ninkei said in shock, "Do I have to fight with the Sage of Sword Liu Bai if he comes?" Eldest brother comforted him and said, "He can't afford to lose face. I think the people who will come to Chang and city to challenge you in the next few years should be some young people. But there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the cultivation sections. Junior brother, although you have made rapid progress, you entered Taoism late and your state is still a little low. So you need to be careful. Senior brother, you know that my state is low, but you still say so. How can I bear it? The state goes from low to high. Don't worry. Why do those people in the wilderness who heard that I was a disciple of the second floor of the academy were scared like quails and did not dare to challenge me? But now that I have entered the human realm, they dare to challenge me? Because that is the wilderness, not Chang'an. You can choose not to accept their challenge in the wilderness, and even their challenge to you can be seen as a provocation to the academy. But in Chang'an, you have to accept their challenge because this challenge is no longer a provocation to the academy, but an opportunity to show the courage and glory of cultivators. Why? Because you are a Tang and a student of the academy. Ninkei found it hard to adapt to these unreasonable but vaguely magnificent unspoken rules. After thinking for a long time, he asked confusedly, "I have defeated Long Qing. Are there still people who don't know what's good for them to challenge me?" Eldest brother said, "But no one believes that you defeated Long Qing with your own strength. And Yi Hong-Yu's evaluation of you after returning to West Hill did not seem to be very high." Ninkei said blankly, "After all, Yi Hong-Yu is an acquaintance. Why should I tell the truth?" Then he began to think about how he should deal with a powerful cultivator like the Tao addict who came to Chang and invited him to a duel. Or in other words, how should he admit defeat in a more elegant manner? At this moment, eldest brother reminded him seriously, "Anyway, you can't lose because the headmaster can't afford to lose." Ninkei lost all his respect for eldest brother after hearing that he couldn't afford to lose 3 times in a row. He said bitterly, "Senior brother, you seem to have forgotten the most important thing. The problem I mentioned to you by the wooden door just now has not been solved. What if others find out that I have joined the devil? Does the academy have to admit that we have taken in the remnants of the Devil's Doctrine? This is indeed a problem. Although it is not a big deal to be accused of taking in the remnants of the Devil's Doctrine, it is still troublesome. We have to think of some ways to cover it up." Eldest brother thought for a moment and said, "Then you don't have to use youngest uncle's great spirit." Ninkei had thought that he could come up with a wonderful idea, but he did not expect such an answer. He could not help but think of the scene of eldest brother apologizing for being late behind the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He thought bitterly that eldest brother was indeed an irresponsible guy. After the conversation with eldest brother, Ninkei found second brother and complained about his troubles, hoping to get some sympathy or military support. Unexpectedly, second brother not only did not sympathize with him, but sternly said that this was a rare opportunity for cultivation. He even sighed with emotion at the end that if he had not been famous in the world, no one would dare to challenge him, and there would be no enemy worthy of his attack. He wished he could replace Ninkei to enter the human realm. Hearing second brother's words, Ninkei finally understood that the so-called entering the human realm was not the academy throwing him out to be a watchdog, to keep quiet, but it was also a kind of cultivation. However, what he was best at in his life was hunting in the forest and chopping off heads at night, so he was somewhat resistant to this kind of cultivation. No matter how resistant he was, he had to accept his fate. So he began to seriously think about how to face the battle invitations that might come at any time in the next few years. According to his previous temperament, he could not admit defeat casually because he might be beaten into ashes by the headmaster of academy. According to his previous temperament, if he met a strong enemy, he would secretly use some insidious means to cut off the enemy's head at night, but he would be beaten into a pulp by second brother. So he found that he really needed help. Sang Sang was naturally the most suitable candidate, but he thought that the process of fighting with those powerful cultivators might be a little dangerous, so he did not want to drag her into it. He also thought that if Spring Breeze Pavilion Old Chow was still in Chong, and then he would really have nothing to fear. With their strength and tacit understanding in battle, even a great divine priest from the West Hill Divine Palace might have a chance to become famous, let alone the Tao addict. It was a pity that Chow Xiaoshu was not here. Fortunately, at least in the recent days, Imo Shanshan was in Chong, and Ning Ke wanted to be a good host. So in the following days, he would go to the residence of the Black Ink Garden disciples every day after leaving the old brush pen shop and take Imo Shanshan to sightsee. Sometimes he would take Cat Girl to a famous restaurant to have a big meal. Thinking that the two had developed a tacit understanding in the wilderness, Ning Ke did not explain too much to the calligraphy addict. However, no explanation often led to problems. In the eyes of those girls from the Great River Kingdom, Mr. 13 of the Academy, who would come to report on time every day, obviously had a different feeling for the Hillmaster. Sometimes it was cloudy and snowy in Chong, and sometimes it was sunny in winter. Ning Ke and Imo Shanshan traveled side by side. Sometimes they held the same umbrella, and sometimes they looked at the same fish by the moat. When they passed the Spring Breeze Pavilion, he told her the story of the murder on that rainy night. When they climbed the Wanyan Tower, he said that there were many stone statues behind it to see. Sometimes they talked about books and talisman Taoism. Time passed slowly and peacefully. Just like this for a few days, Ning Ke did not meet any big man jumping out of the street, nor did he see a Taoist sword flying toward him. The so-called challenge of entering the human realm had no trace at all. He thought that this was right. With the Academy's reputation, which cultivator would be so bored to come and challenge him? He no longer worried about this matter. That day, eldest brother made him vaguely understand the Academy's attitude toward joining the devil. With a beautiful female talisman master accompanying him, he could not help but be in a good mood. He thought that the Academy's title of entering the human realm was quite magnanimous. According to what eldest brother said, the Academy had the responsibility to help the Tang Empire advance in an orderly manner. Didn't that mean that after a few years, he could also express his opinion on who would be the Tang Empire's emperor? Thinking of these things, he could not help but feel proud. On a day when the winter snow was gradually melting, Ning Ke held the big black umbrella and waited outside the Ministry of Rites. He and Imo Shanshan had made an appointment to go to the Forest of Steels to see the calligraphy of the predecessors. However, not long after Imo Shanshan walked out of the Ministry of Rites, a young monk in a thin frock also followed the two of them. He put his palms together and asked politely, "May I ask if you are Mr. 13 of the Academy?" My bad brain made a mistake. It's about the relationship between the Academy and the military. But in fact, this mistake happened before, not today. Hua Shangyue should not have studied in the Academy. Because earlier, when you talked about Ning Ke's future, I had already confirmed that after graduating from the Academy, he could not join the military. But later, I forgot about it, so I made more mistakes. There are many things in the outline, including Elon. So I can only change the rule that after graduating from the Academy, and I will change it when I am free. Sorry. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 347. The young monk was about 25 or 26 years old. He was handsome and kind, with a slightly dark complexion. His thin robes fluttered in the wind, making him look otherworldly. However, it was still winter, and no one knew why he was not afraid of the cold. Ning Ke felt a little wary, but he did not show it on his face. He smiled and asked, "Master, do you know me?" The monk smiled and said, "This poor monk guessed." Ning Ke asked in surprise, "You guessed it?" The monk said calmly, because I have seen the calligraphy addict, so I guess that you're Mr. 13. Ning Ke thought of the rumor that had been spreading recently and could not help but laugh bitterly. Mo Shanshan looked at the young monk, and her eyes gradually focused. She thought of the scene when they met years ago and said with slight surprise, "So, it's senior brother Guan Hai. How have you been? Why are you in Chang'an?" Through her introduction, Ning Ke found out that the young monk was Guan Hai, the last disciple of the Lang Temple elder. His expression suddenly became a little strange. This world was different from the one Ning Ke had lived in. Not every housewife was a master of both Buddhism and Taoism. Compared with Haoyan Taoism, the influence of the Buddhism sect was much smaller, and the Dharma was not prosperous. However, the Lang Temple was too famous, especially to ordinary people. No one knew about the Xiankong Temple, but they all knew about the Lang Temple. To cultivators, the Lang Temple had a higher status than the White Tower Temple of the Yuelun Kingdom. Even Ning Ke, who did not know anything about the Buddhism sect, had heard of the Lang Temple and had a deep impression of it. Too many stories had happened in the thousand-year-old temple. Master Lotus had become famous because of his debate with the Lang Temple elder. Later, he had secluded himself in the temple for several years. The bloody case of the destruction of the devil's doctrine, which had completely changed the face of the cultivation world, had also started in front of the Lang Temple. Ning Ke had first heard of the Lang Temple when Prince Longqing first entered Chang. Longqing had also become famous because of his debate in the Lang Temple. Thinking of this, he could not help but wonder if cultivators in the world who wanted to become famous had to go through the Lang Temple and participate in the debate organized by the Lang Temple. Because of these stories, the Lang Temple had a special status in the cultivation world. The elder who lived in seclusion in the back of the mountain was even more senior. Since the young monk in front of the umbrella was a disciple of the elder of the Lang Temple, he should have a higher status than the legendary 7 disciples of the Buddhism sect. According to Ning Ke's character, he should have gotten closer to this young monk called Guan Hai. However, he had been wary of other sects coming to challenge him because of the so-called Academy's entry into the human realm. Now that he suddenly saw someone from the Lang Temple appear in Chang, and he could not help but feel uneasy. "So, it's the Vedanta of the Lang Temple. I don't know why I didn't see you in the palace," he said with a smile. The young monk said that he did not dare and said respectfully, "I don't dare to call myself Vedanta. Moreover, my master bowed to the headmaster of the academy as a disciple. How can Lin Hai bear the title of senior brother, Mr. 13? As for the matter in the wilderness, the temple has also received an edict from the Divine Hall. However, the disciples of the Buddhism sect pay attention to cultivation and do not get involved in the mortal world, so we did not go." Hearing these words, Ning Ke thought to himself that the monk would not covet fame if he did not mess with the mortal world, so he probably would not make trouble for him. Ning Ke felt a little relieved, and when he saw the admiration in the monk's clear eyes, he felt very comfortable. He asked gently, "Senior brother, what business do you have at Chang'an?" No matter if it was a sedan chair or a bamboo sedan chair, it always needed 2 people to carry it. That was why Lin Hai did not dare to admit that he was the senior brother. However, Ning Ke insisted on calling him that. From this, eldest brother was right. He was indeed the best candidate for the back mountain of the academy. Lin Hai took out an envelope wrapped in yellow cloth and said, "I changed my documents at the Ministry of Rights and was about to leave the city to go to the academy. I did not expect to meet Mr. 13, so I can send this invitation to you and slack off." An invitation to the academy? Ning Ke opened the yellow cloth and found that the envelope was not sealed. He took out a very thin piece of paper. The content of the paper was simple and clear. It was an invitation from the Lang Temple elder to the academy to send someone to attend the Yuan Hungry Ghost Festival next year. After the conversation with eldest brother, he was very clear that if the academy had any secular affairs in the future, they would be handled by him. Then he would definitely attend the Yuan Hungry Ghost Festival in the Lang Temple. Fortunately, there was still more than a year's time, so he could prepare well. Moreover, he could confirm that the person from the Lang Temple was here to send an invitation, so he could not help but feel more at ease. He looked at Guan Hai and said with a smile, "Senior brother, you have come from the Lang Temple, so you should be a good host. However, I have made an appointment with the Hill Master to travel together. I will drink tea and chat with Senior Brother at night. Is that okay? Monk Guanhai replied respectfully, Mr. 13, you are too polite. I have come to Chang and under the orders of my master and have already slowed down my studies. Since I have already sent the invitation to you today, I will return to the temple later. Let's go, let's go. I have to return home, Ning Ke thought happily. However, on the surface, he was extremely enthusiastic and tried to persuade him to stay. He even put on a fake angry look that was unique to men from Hebei County. Monk Guanhai refused repeatedly and said, I really cannot delay my studies any longer. It is just that it is rare for me to come to Chang and then meet Mr. 13 in person. I have some problems in cultivation and hope that Mr. 13 can give me some advice. No problem at all. Speaking of which, I will book a table of vegetarian noodles at the Building of Pines and Cranes in the evening, along with 2 jars of vegetarian wine. You and I could drink and chat, or even have tea. We could discuss it in detail then. Now, what did you say just now? Ning Ke spoke in high spirits and fully acted like a person from the academy who had entered the human realm. It was only then that he came to his senses. There were many things in the world that did not need to be said clearly and could not be said clearly, because if it was said too clearly, it would make both parties feel embarrassed. People who came from places like the Academy, the West Hill Divine Palace, or the Lank Temple usually had to pay attention to their demeanor. Since they were cultivators who had not entered the human realm, how could they act like hooligans in the secular world who would pick up a watermelon knife and slash at the other party's chest or bald head without saying anything or saying a few harsh words? Even if they wanted to fight, they had to find prettier clothes and a better reason for it. People like Ning Ke and Yi Hong Yu, who fought as they pleased and never cared about their demeanor and only wanted to win, were rare in the cultivation world. As for the prettier clothes and the better reason, it was nothing more than to ask for advice on the problems in cultivation and to discuss the state of cultivation with each other. Without all these external appearances, the naked truth was to ask for a fight. After confirming that the monk from the Lank Temple had issued an invitation for a fight, Ning Ke's expression changed slightly. Looking at the monk's slightly dark cheeks, he could not help but think of Sang Sang and Zhuor's skin color. He thought to himself that he seemed to be going against people with skin color like that for the rest of his life. After a moment, he said sincerely, "A monk is merciful. Why do you care about this superficial reputation?" Monk Guanhai said with more sincerity, "I have been cultivating in the temple for many years, and I have often heard the elders talk about the past of seeking guidance from the headmaster. I know that the academy is a first-class place in the world, and I have always yearned to visit the academy. However, I've always been tied down by my schoolwork. It is rare for me to come to Chang'an City today, and I hope Mr. 13 can understand my rare greed and give me some advice." Ning Ke stared into his eyes and found that there was nothing but respect and admiration in the young monk's eyes. There was nothing but a firm will to fight. The other party was so respectful and admiring. How could you scold him? The other party had such a firm will to fight, and he was a stubborn monk who never ate oil and rarely ate salt. How could you persuade him? Ning Ke did not know how to deal with the situation in front of him. If it had been in the city of Wei, he could have run away. However, he was forced to carry the 2 mountains of the Tang Empire and the academy on his back. If he really ran, it would be difficult. In fact, he had never been afraid of fighting, let alone fighting. He was just worried that he could not win. Guanhai was the last disciple of the Lank Temple elder. In Ning Ke's opinion, the last disciple of the master of calligrapher, Mo Shanshan, and himself, the last disciple of the headmaster of academy. Well, he had to admit that he was the weakest wayfarer of the academy in history. Therefore, he had less and less confidence in defeating the other party. Sometimes it could be called courage, but sometimes it could be called stupidity. Ning Ke held the big black umbrella and fell into a long silence in the light snow of Chang'an. He struggled between bravery and wisdom, but he could not come up with an answer. Mo Shanshan had been standing quietly by the big black umbrella. She could probably guess the pain in his heart. She could not help but look down and blink her eyelashes. It took a lot of effort to not let a smile appear on her face. Monk Guanhai was an honest man. Ever since he was young, he had always heard the elders' respect and admiration for the headmaster of academy. He had never thought that he could defeat a student of the second floor of the academy. Now, seeing that Ning Ke was silent for a long time, he thought that Mr. 13 probably did not want him to lose too badly. He could not help but feel touched. Mr. 13, if you think that my cultivation is low, why don't we sit down and meditate? He said sincerely. Ning Ke thought to himself that the Lang Temple was famous for debating. Besides, the monk's skin was slightly dark, and his name was Guanhai. It was obvious that he ate a lot of soybean oil and was good at arguing with others. If he were to sit down and meditate with him, wouldn't he be defeated in less than 3 breaths and officially announce his defeat in the first battle after entering the human realm? Losing was not a problem. The problem was that eldest brother would not let him lose. The problem was that it would bring shame to the academy and the headmaster of academy. The headmaster of academy did not seem to be able to afford to lose, so this would lead to a series of very serious problems. Ning Ke raised his head and met the monk's clear and sincere eyes. His heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly felt that he lacked something very important compared to the monk. The falling snowflakes covered the greasy surface of the big black umbrella. Ning Ke looked at the monk and said calmly, "Senior brother, can I trouble you to wait for me for half a day?" Monk Guanhai put his palms together. Mo Shanshan looked at him and asked, "What do you need half a day for?" "I need half a day to think about a very important problem." After saying this, Ning Ke closed the big black umbrella and carried it on his back. He walked toward the south of Chang and in the light snow. An hour later, he came to the newly dredged lake in the south of the city and slowly sat down in the snow. My inability to compose sentences suddenly flared up. It's very painful to write, and I don't know how to write. But today is the last day, and I can't drop the ball. I will continue to struggle like Ning Ke, and I will win. The next chapter may be later, but if it goes well, it won't be too late. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 348. There was a large lake by the Yinming Mountain in the south of Chang'an. It had just been dredged in the early autumn of the 14th year of Tianqi era. The mortar in the stone embankment along the lake still had a fresh smell. In the deep winter, the lake water had already frozen. The turbid air in the air seemed to have turned into dust on the ice, making it look exceptionally fresh. Ning Ke had heard about this lake from eldest brother a few days ago, so he came here after leaving alone with an umbrella. He sat in the snow for a long time. He did not see eldest brother's figure, but he saw the fisherman who broke through the ice net that eldest brother had mentioned. He looked at the nooses that creaked as they turned, and the horses that were panting on the ice as they tried their best to turn the nooses, dragging the huge fish net under the ice. He was silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. Guanhai, the last disciple of the elder of Lang Temple, was the first direct challenge he had encountered after entering the human realm on behalf of the academy. If he retreated today, it would definitely have a very serious impact on his state of mind and cultivation in the future. If he did not dare to accept the challenge, then how could he challenge Xiaoho in the future, as eldest brother had said? The reason why he had struggled and hesitated for such a long time was that he had joined the devil. He was very worried that he would not be able to control himself in the fierce battle and expose the fact that he had joined the devil. Even if he could forcibly control himself, the great spirit that youngest uncle had inherited was his most powerful strength. He could not use the primordial 13 arrows in a battle to prove the state of cultivation. If he could not use these two most powerful weapons, how could he defeat a cultivation powerhouse like Guanhai? Without the great spirit and the primordial 13 arrows, Ning Ke was still a cultivation loser who had only opened 10 acupoints in the ocean of Qi and mountain of snow. His psyche power controlled the flying sword as if he was crawling. Besides Sang Sang, he had not found his natal item. In Chun Pippi's words, even if he entered the knowing destiny state in this state, it would still be meaningless. Ning Ke sat in the snow by the lake and looked at the grass in front of him. He suddenly thought of the talisman that covered the sky in the garden of Tuyong City and the military counselor Gu, she who had cast countless talismans in an instant. He stretched out his right hand and flicked his cotton sleeve lightly. A piece of light yellow talisman paper fell on the surface of the ice. With a sizzling sound, it turned into an extremely weak flame. Then it instantly dimmed and was easily extinguished by the layer of ice on the surface of the lake. Although Master Yensei was sure that he was the most potential successor of the divine talisman master, the potential was not equal to the strength. Talisman Taoism was originally a relatively difficult and dangerous way of cultivation. How could it be possible to achieve it quickly? Ninkei looked at the busy fishermen and horses on the lake in silence. He had once practiced flying swordsmanship by the mirror lake of the academy. He had once broken through the realm and entered the see-through state by the bright lake of the Devil's Doctrine. However, he had sat by the nameless lake at the foot of the Yinming Mountain for a long time today. Yet he had gained nothing. Time passed slowly but surely. The snow had long stopped, and the clouds above Chang and had all dispersed. The sun was gradually setting, and the red twilight shone on the pure white ice, as if the whole lake was about to be ignited. Looking at this breathtakingly beautiful scenery, Ninkei's heart was slightly moved. He remembered that his master had once told him that when writing talismans, one should keep the shape and forget the meaning. But when casting talismans, one should concentrate the qi in one's heart. He had a deep understanding of the meaning of keeping the shape and forgetting the meaning when he was reading books on the second floor of the old library. Then, how should he explain the 4 words, intentional but unintentional? If the word intentional referred to the psyche power, then what did the qi refer to? Of course, it was the qi of heaven and earth. The so-called casting talismans was to use the psyche power to activate the meaning of the talisman characters on the paper, and then use the natural aura contained in the talisman characters to influence the surrounding qi of heaven and earth. If the talisman characters were strong enough, then the influence would appear in an unimaginable way, such as burning, being still, reversing the flow of mountains and rivers, and even turning the world upside down to reverse the flow of mountains and rivers and turn the world upside down. That was an amazing talisman that could only be written by a sage who was countless states higher than the divine talisman master. Ninkei was now infinitely far away from that state, and the talisman characters he wrote now were too weak. They could only mobilize a very small amount of qi of heaven and earth, and could only be used to dry the hair and warm the body of the little handmaiden and the young talisman master in winter. It was even a little difficult to light the firewood in the stove, let alone use it to fight against the enemy. However, although the talisman paper was weak, what if it could mobilize enough qi? It was like a little girl at the corner of the street holding a match that could be blown out by the cold wind at any time. But what if a barrel of gunpowder suddenly appeared above the match? Well, this idea was a little too cruel, but it seemed to make some sense. Ninkei looked at the lake that seemed to be burning, and a trace of joy gradually appeared on his face. For a traditional talisman master, his idea at this time was completely deviant and meaningless, because as everyone knew, the qi of heaven and earth was distributed in a relatively balanced state in the fields, mountains, rivers, and lakes. Even if there were slightly more famous mountains and rivers, it was far from that level because Haoyin was fair. However, Ninkei was not a traditional talisman master. He was a talisman master who had joined the devil. During these days, from the mottled walls of the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine to Chang, and his body had been slowly absorbing the qi of heaven and earth in nature, and then storing it quietly in the depths of his body, turning it into his own Great Spirit. The Great Spirit was also qi, and it was many times more condensed and pure than the qi of heaven and earth in nature. The yellowish talisman paper trembled slightly in front of him. It was unknown whether it was because of the wind blowing on the lake, or because Ninkei's hands were trembling, or because it felt the horrible aura that was pouring into his thin body. A wisp of Great Spirit entered the talisman paper, and Ninkei flicked the talisman paper to the ice on the surface of the lake. At the moment before the talisman paper floated away from his fingertips, the psyche power in his sense of perception burst out at the same time and instantly fell on the talisman paper. It seemed like a simple action, but in fact it required the movement of the body and the psyche power to be absolutely consistent, without any mistakes. An ordinary person would definitely not be able to do this, but Ninkei had experience with talisman arrows, so he was very familiar with it. As the yellowish talisman paper was triggered, a very slight dryness seeped out from the paper. According to the concentration of the chi of heaven and earth by the lake, this slight dryness could at most form a very small flame, and then fell on the surface of the lake, and instantly extinguished like the previous talisman paper. However, this time, the slight dryness instantly turned into a ball of blue fire. That was the great spirit that was attached to the talisman paper, but had not had time to float back to heaven and earth, and was burning. Looking at the blue flame floating in the air, Ninkei did not know whether it was a success or a failure. This time it obviously felt different from when he cast talismans in the past, but why did the size of the flame not change significantly? As he was thinking about this, the blue flame had already fallen on the surface of the lake. After a very slight, sizzling sound, the blue flame instantly disappeared without a trace, and a hole the size of a bucket appeared where it fell on the ice layer. However, looking from the shore of the lake, it was unknown how deep the hole was. With a splash, a fat fish jumped out of the hole and flicked its tail on the ice surface. It turned out that the seemingly inconspicuous blue flame had actually burned through the thick layer of ice on the lake in an instant. The loud chants of the fishermen sounded on the ice layer in the distance in the lake. The work of breaking the ice net to fish had reached the most critical moment. With the hard work of the horses, the capstan turned faster and faster, and the fish net under the ice was dragged faster and faster. Gradually, a big hole appeared, and countless fish were desperately struggling in the net. Countless people on the lake shore cheered and cheered. Ninkei looked at the fat fish bouncing on the ice not far in front of him, and smiled happily. He got up and patted off the snow and grass on his body, and then left in the deafening cheers. Chang was exceptionally beautiful and peaceful in the winter at dusk. It was just like Ninkei's mood at this moment. He walked into the tea shop and looked at the two people who were whispering to each other by the window. He suddenly smiled and said, "Talismans can really change the world." And Mo Shanshan looked at him quietly and somehow felt that there was something different about him now compared to him on the street earlier. Then Ninkei turned to look at the monk Guan Hai and said calmly, "Whether it is to study or to ask for advice, please." The monk Guan Hai stood up and looked at him with a slight frown. Just like Mo Shanshan, he felt that Ninkei was slightly different from before. However, it had only been half a day, so what could have happened? Looking up, he saw the winter tree with withered branches like arms, and behind the branches was the palace wall. Ninkei withdrew his gaze and walked into the southern gate Taoist temple at the foot of the imperial city with Mo Shanshan and Guan Hai. Looking at the Taoist with a yellow paper umbrella in front of the temple, he said softly, "Senior Brother Mingxi, I would like to borrow the land." Mingxi looked at the slightly tanned monk and said with a smile, "Master Guan Hai is the earliest." Guan Hai put his palms together and bowed. Mingxi looked at Ninkei and said softly, "Master is not in the temple, but since this is the matter, I will make the decision." Ninkei said, "Thank you, Senior Brother Mingxi." Mingxi shook his head and said, "Mr. 13's first battle in the human realm will be held in the Southern Gate Taoist Temple. This will be recorded in the history books in the future. We'll be stupid enough to keep you out." The door of the temple slowly closed. Mingxi looked at Mo Shanshan and said, "What do you think of the outcome, Hill Master?" Mo Shanshan looked at the closed door and said, "I thought Ninkei would definitely lose, but after half a day, I am not so sure." Mingxi looked at the door and said with a smile, "If he was going to lose, why would he choose the Southern Gate Taoist Temple as the battlefield?" The usually quiet front of the Hall of the Righteous Path of the Southern Gate Temple had become very lively. Although no one was talking, the sound of breathing and whispering was already very noisy. Everyone from the southern gate Taoist temple appeared in front of the temple, wanting to know the outcome of the battle as soon as possible. Just as Ming-Chi said, if Ning Ke was not confident of winning, he would not have chosen this place as the battlefield. After all, no matter if he or Guanhai won, the result would be spread around the world in the shortest time possible. The name of the disciple of the Lang Temple was indeed Lin Hai, but I thought that he was about to be beaten up by Ning Ke in the book. I was afraid that Lin Hai would come and beat me, so I changed it to Guanhai. In the end, I still missed 3 parts. This is the 2nd chapter. There are still 3 hours. I will continue writing the 3rd chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 349. Ning Ke had deliberately chosen the main hall of the Southern Gate Temple as the battlefield. The sounds of battles between cultivators were too shocking and could not be carried out in the streets. He did not want too many people to see him attack, so he needed to choose a sealed space. That space had to be large enough, because only then could cultivators who cultivated different methods feel that it was fair. The main hall of the Southern Gate Taoist Temple was very large. The black beam at the top was like a line across the sky. The space was so wide that it could fit an entire 1,000-year-old tree and a dozen rockery. However, there were no tall trees or rockery in the hall. There weren't even any tables or chairs. There were only beams and pillars at the side, which made it look especially spacious. The black wooden planks on the floor seemed to have no end. Ning Ke and Guanhai sat cross-legged on the straw mats at the 2 ends of the black floor, facing each other. The 2 nodded to each other. Ning Ke said, I have no knives or arrows, only talismans. Today's battle will be fought with talismans. Monk Guanhai said, I have the emblematic gesture of Buddhism and the Buddhist hymn to protect myself. The hall was too spacious, and their voices kept echoing on the black floor. Monk Guanhai continued, I want Mr. 13 to know that my respect for the Academy is real, and my admiration for you is also real. However, I only want to win today's battle because I regard my teacher as a Buddha, but my teacher regards the headmaster of the Academy as a Buddha. All these years, every time I think of this, I feel angry. In order to get rid of this anger, I must defeat you today. Ning Ke looked at the monk in the distance and said, If you want to defeat me, please make your move. Monk Guanhai said, It is not right for a Buddhist disciple to act rashly. How can you make the first move? Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, If I make the first move, you won't have the chance to make your move. Monk Guanhai raised his right palm in front of him and smiled without saying anything. Ning Ke did not know that the monk's gesture was the solemn Dharma idol of the Buddhism sect, but he could clearly feel an extremely pure Buddhist aura suddenly appearing in the spacious Taoist hall. It was clear and indifferent, making people feel that they did not want to fight. However, since it was a battle, how could they not fight? Ning Ke placed his left hand on his knee and raised his right hand slowly. With a flick of his fingertips, a yellowish fu paper slowly floated out. The doors and windows had long been closed, and there was no breeze in the hall. However, for some reason, the fu paper seemed to be able to borrow the wind. Like a fallen leaf in an autumn wind, it floated through the entire hall and fell towards Monk Guanhai. When the piece of talisman paper floated 2 feet in front of Monk Guanhai, he suddenly bent the index finger of his right palm in front of him. With this action, the Wisdom King Dharma image of his body became complete, and the aura around his body suddenly became several times thicker. In front of this powerful and thick Buddhist aura, the faintly yellow talisman paper seemed so weak, like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind. However, as soon as the 2 met, the talisman paper instantly burned fiercely. In a very short period of time, it expanded into a huge fireball and enveloped Monk Guanhai's body. In the face of such a fierce talisman fire, Monk Guanhai's expression did not change. He even slowly closed his eyes. The middle finger of his right palm, which was erected in front of his chest, bent again. The image of the Wisdom King, whose body resembled his, had an additional sense of calmness and gentleness. The aura of heaven and earth in the hall was affected by this calmness and fell gently, forming an extremely thin barrier around his body. The flames enveloped Monk Guanhai's body, burning the extremely thin barrier of the chi of heaven and earth. It made a strange crackling sound, as if dry firewood was being burned, or like a kettle being boiled dry. However, between the swaying flames, one could clearly see that Monk Guanhai's eyes were calm. The invisible barrier was still stable and was not affected at all. The talisman fire relied on talisman intent and could not last long. When the talisman intent on the Fu paper dissipated into the air, the flame that enveloped Monk Guanhai's body also gradually extinguished. The invisible barrier reflected the last remnants of the flame, shining brightly like a very beautiful glass cover. At this moment, Monk Guanhai opened his eyes inside the cover and looked at Ning Ke, who was sitting on the straw mat opposite the hall. His gaze was calm and firm. Next, it seemed that it was the powerhouse of the Buddhism sect's turn to counterattack. However, Ning Ke had said that if he attacked first, Monk Guanhai would not have the chance to attack again. And that was exactly what he did. Just as the talisman fire burned the invisible barrier of the chi of heaven and earth around Monk Guanhai, the second talisman paper had already quietly floated out of his sleeve and floated towards Monk Guanhai along the dark mat floor. When the talisman fire finally dissipated and Monk Guanhai opened his eyes to counterattack, the talisman paper began to release a majestic talisman intent. A majestic rainstorm fell from the sky. However, they were now in the Taoist hall. The hall had a roof, so where did the sky come from? The rainstorm was generated out of nowhere from the air about 30 feet high in the Taoist hall, and then fell down. The scene was extremely strange. Monk Guanhai's Wisdom King Dharma idol could condense the chi of heaven and earth into Wisdom King armor. When cultivated to a high level, it could isolate all the invisible and intangible forces in the world, such as psyche power and Fu fire. However, the heavy rain falling from the Taoist hall was real, and the invisible barrier could not stop it at all. In an instant, Monk Guanhai was drenched from head to toe. The slightly cold rainwater flowed down his thin monk's robe and also on Monk Guanhai's slightly tanned face. He looked at Ning Ke on the straw mat in the distance and was extremely puzzled. Why was the second talisman a water talisman? The fierce Fu fire earlier confirmed that Ning Ke's attainments in talisman Taoism were indeed profound. If he had not cultivated the Dharma idol of heaven, he was afraid that he would have been at a great disadvantage. However, water was the softest and weakest thing in the world. If one wanted to defeat the enemy with just a water talisman, one had to cultivate to the state of a divine talisman master. Only then could one accumulate all the water in the world and turn it into the strongest and strongest. However, Ning Ke was clearly very far from being a divine talisman master. The rainwater dripped on Monk Guanhai's face, washing away his puzzlement and doubts. The rainwater seemed majestic, but in fact, it did not cause any harm to him. He decided not to think about these questions anymore. The middle finger of his right palm suddenly flicked out in front of him, and the fingertip flicked a raindrop that had slipped into his eyes. In fact, Monk Guanhai's finger did not really touch the raindrop. It was only his intention that touched the raindrop, and then the raindrop understood his intention. With a swoosh, it cut through the space in the hall and attacked Ning Ke's face, as swift as a feather arrow. Ning Ke did not seem to see the raindrop. He did not make any movement to avoid it, and only lowered his head. Through the waterfall-like curtain of rain in front of him, Monk Guanhai could vaguely see the raindrop enter Ning Ke's hair. He could not help but be slightly shocked. He thought to himself, if he really hurt Ning Ke, how would the Lank Temple explain it to the Academy? However, unexpectedly, the raindrop did not seem to have any effect on Ning Quebec. He only quietly lowered his head, and the third talisman he had cast had already floated in front of Monk Guanhai. Just as the rainstorm in the hall gradually stopped, he suddenly released all the talisman intent. The pure aura condensed on the talisman seeped into every drop of water. The rainstorm suddenly stopped, but the rainwater was still on Monk Guanhai's body, flowing on the dark mat floor. As the talisman intent seeped in, the rainwater quickly froze at a speed visible to the naked eye. The water flowing on the floor turned into a miniature glacier, and the rainwater falling on Monk Guanhai's head turned into a miniature ice waterfall. A strong chill shrouded the empty Taoist hall. The rainwater in Monk Guanhai's monk robes and on his face all froze. His eyelashes turned into icicles under the eaves in winter, and his entire body was covered with a layer of transparent ice armor. He looked like an ice Buddha statue. The water between the ice Buddha statue and the dark floor had also froze. Those who had lived in the cold knew that being frozen like this was even stronger than sticking asphalt. Monk Guanhai's entire body was frozen in the ice and could not exert any strength. It was impossible for him to get out of this predicament in a short period of time. It seemed that he could only wait to be easily defeated by Ning Quebec. However, although Monk Guanhai was not famous, he was after all the last disciple of the Lang Temple's reclusive elder. His cultivation in Dharma was even higher than the 7 disciples of the Buddhism sect. How could he be defeated by these talismans? Monk Guanhai was frozen in ice. His body could not move, but his heart could. His lips could not move, but his mind could. A deep and compassionate voice sounded from his chest. It was hard to understand, but it was very solemn. It was the Buddhist hymn. As the Buddhist hymn rang through the empty Taoist hall, Monk Guanhai's eyelashes trembled slightly. The frozen ice on them fell, and the ice armor on his thin monk robes cracked inch by inch. The ice on his sleeves melted, and his hands finally regained their freedom. Monks used their hands to worship Buddha. Therefore, the most important part of the Buddhism sect's cultivation was also the hands. Monk Guanhai's hands regained their freedom. Without hesitation, he clasped his palms together. 2 wisdom king's mudra appeared on the left and right sides. A strong Vajra spirit suddenly gushed out from his body, easily shattering all the talismans around him into pieces. Tens of thousands of pieces of ice floated around Monk Guanhai. The last rays of twilight outside the hall leaked in through the cracks of the window. They were reflected and refracted by the tens of thousands of pieces of ice, turning into countless golden rays of light. Monk Guanhai's body was in a golden light. The Wisdom King's Dharma idol had finally reached the perfect state. At this moment, Ning Ke raised his head and looked quietly at Monk Guanhai in the light of Buddha. His left hand, which had been resting on his knee, suddenly tightened and crushed the talisman that he had been secretly holding for a long time. Ning Ke had used the bag that Master Yin Sei had left for him by the Daming Lake. After observing the meaning of the talisman, he had comprehended the first talisman of his cultivation life on his journey back to Chang. It was the scatter talisman that he was casting now. This scatter talisman did not float to Monk Guanhai. Because it was a talisman of movement, Ning Ke could not use the Dharma access that he had comprehended at the Winter Lake on the Yinming Mountain. The talisman's meaning was far away and seemed a little weak. Monk Guanhai, who was in the golden light, frowned slightly because he could also feel the weakness of this talisman. Ning Ke's target of casting the scatter talisman was not him, but the tens of thousands of pieces of ice that shrouded him. As the meaning of the scatter talisman fell, the tiny pieces became even smaller. What was even smaller than the ice was dust. Ice was water. The dust that the water turned into was either cloud or fog. Countless clouds and fog filled the Taoist temple. It was as if the world had suddenly come to a sea of clouds high in the sky, blocking all vision and even disturbing all the aura of heaven and earth. At this moment, the clouds and fog suddenly fluctuated. The clouds and fog dissipated slightly, and Ning Ke's figure appeared. His figure had already arrived in front of Monk Guanhai. He was so close. There's still 30 minutes left. This is the 3rd chapter. As I said, I have nothing to repay you with, so I have to write another chapter. At least I will finish writing this battle tonight, but it may be a little later. Thank you very much. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 350. Many students hope that I could write a chapter to sell my cuteness or something, but this chapter might be difficult to sell cuteness. Firstly, I'm a little emotional at the moment. Secondly, I want to write this important chapter seriously. Thirdly, I'm really exhausted. Now, I'm going to talk to you in a serious and lively manner. If there's anything that you don't like, please forgive me. I'll thank you all first, and I'll thank you in detail later. Jiang Yi obtained first place in the monthly votes this month. As I said the day before yesterday, at least until now, Chidian's monthly votes ranking is still the greatest honor in the online literature circle. Now, we can say that we've had this honor. I really like the monthly votes ranking. I think there's no one who doesn't like it. It's not only the honor of the author and the book, it's also the honor of the readers. Because of my laziness, I've never thought about it. I'm sorry to many of my readers, including the sub-editors. At the beginning of the year, after careful consideration, I decided to change my attitude. I'll find a suitable time, when there's enough time and no chores to fight for it. At that time, I decided to do it in May. The reason was actually very simple. This month is Grandpa's 70th birthday. After writing for so many years and using Grandpa's character to swear, I wanted to make him happy. Grandpa is also reading at Chidian, and he's more concerned about the monthly votes ranking than I am. However, at the beginning of the year, I received a notice that there would be an annual meeting in May. Following that, Jiang Ye's readers would gather in Shanghai. I wanted to go back to my hometown in Hubei to celebrate Grandpa's birthday, so I didn't have the time to do it. So, I told Yin Kai that I definitely wouldn't be able to get it in May. I had to move it to another year before I had the energy to do it. Yin Kai immediately decided to resign, which put a lot of pressure on me. Indeed, I didn't want to fight for first place in the monthly votes. Then, why did history go on this track? At the beginning of the month, on the 1st of May, coincided with Chidian's double monthly votes period. Jiang Yi wrote about Yin Sei and Guang Guang turning to ashes and Sang Sang holding ashes. When I wrote it, I felt that it was great. It wouldn't be worthwhile if I didn't canvass for votes at this time, so I opened a separate chapter to canvass for votes. I knew I would get a lot of monthly votes, but I didn't expect that I would get so many monthly votes. Even though I became the monthly votes rankings first, I didn't think it would last for long. Because I had a lot of things to do in May, I knew I wouldn't be able to write much. Even my readers didn't think it would last for long. According to them, I would be satisfied if I could stay on for a minute. But at that time, I thought that it would be best if I could maintain it until the old man's 70th birthday on the 8th of May. So, I shamelessly issued separate chapters to canvass for votes. You don't even need to say that I actually managed to maintain it. Then, it became what everyone saw recently. I was forced to go crazy. I had no choice. Seeing everyone working so hard to cast monthly votes, canvass for votes, and even tipping so many people into monthly votes, I couldn't help but go crazy. Because I couldn't even convince myself to drop the ball at such time. That was a behavior that deserved a beating. Let me say something sour, but it was very true for Jiang Yimi and you. This time, the monthly votes rankings first place wasn't mine, but yours. At least, it should be said that you forced me to do it. I thank you. Thank you for forcing me. I hope that you will be as happy as I am tonight. Previously, I said that I've been working like crazy this month. In fact, this isn't the most I've written in so many years. It's not even the most I've written in the past month. But I can say that I've really done my best. I've really worked very hard to write. I've done this with a clear conscience, and I've done it with a clear conscience towards all of you. This month, I spent half a month drifting abroad. Needless to say, I was tired from the long journey. In fact, I went from Yichang to the annual meeting. After returning from Shanghai on the 20th, I had a personal matter that made me waste 2 days. But I really used all the time I could spare to write. On the 25th, I suddenly found out that Broken Car had its annual inspection this year, but it didn't pass that day. On the 27th, my rhinitis actually flared up. It hurt for a whole 5 days, and I suffered for 5 days. But I still had to desperately write and explode. These days, I've been really bitter to the extreme. You probably can't guess when Broken Car will have its annual inspection. It's this afternoon. I found a proxy company. I don't have to go myself, and I could try to write more. Because the proxy company asked me to drive the car to their company, I was afraid that I would have problems driving during the day. So after writing those 5 chapters late last night, I dragged my tired body, changed my clothes, and drove the car to the entrance of their company. At that time, the northeast sky was already bright. It seems to be literary? Take it back. At this time, the battle for the monthly votes has ended, so I can tell you these things calmly without worrying about being criticized. I'm reporting these bitter things one by one, just to let you know that I really worked hard this month. The first monthly vote you cast is valuable, and it's worth it. I know that it's hard for you, and it's very sad. Fortunately, this kind of hard work has finally paid off, so it's also worth it. If the first place in the monthly votes counts as a military medal, then we finally have one on our chests. No matter what happens in the future, we can always take it out to be happy, right? Please allow me to once again literary this military medal to you first. There are many names that I won't list because it's impossible to list them all in a single chapter. I thank you. Then I give this military medal to the old man because I've been a playful guy all my life. Apart from the small contributions I've made to the family's finances because of your love for me in the past few years, there's actually nothing for the old man to show off, so I give it to him. Then I give this military medal to myself and to my wife, who has been having a fever these days, but still insisted on cooking instant noodles for me every day. Why are the two of us so bitter this month? Don't tell me that there's only one military medal. My eyes are blurry at this time, so there are countless of them, and I can give them everywhere I want. Finally, please allow me to talk about something more serious. Yesterday, after I finished writing 5 chapters, I drove to the agency late at night and saw the first rays of dawn. Lying on the bed, I picked up my phone and nervously scrolled through the monthly votes rankings. That's when I saw Tomato's single chapter. To be honest, I was very emotional at that time. Perhaps many people would say that I'm pretentious, but I really wasn't pretentious because I was really emotional. Back then, I was also in the same situation, and I was very distressed. Even though my body was already in such a state, I couldn't say it unless I was desperate, because I would be ridiculed by many readers. I shouldn't have written all this, but I couldn't help but write it anyway, since I'm old and thick-skinned. All right, I still deleted a lot of paragraphs. The general meaning was that after so many years, it wasn't easy for everyone, and the monthly votes rankings were both good and bad at the same time, so the readers should understand and not fight. In this battle for the monthly votes, Tomato and I didn't fight for it. Maybe we did fight for it, but because we liked each other and because we were the rare ones on Chidian who had Saturdays off, we appreciated each other and resolved the conflict. But what if it was with other authors? What if it was with Pai, Earroot, Uncle Guan, Potato, 72, Chun Dong, Third Young Master, and many other authors? What if it turned out to be a fight? The circle of authors was only so big, and we were all otakus. There were only so many people we knew and admired. I was really afraid of causing some unhappiness. In other words, I was a bit clingy or rather homesick. Anyway, that was my personality. So, I really loved and hated the monthly votes, regardless of whether I was pretentious or not. These days, I've been thinking about these things, so I couldn't help but say it. If I disturbed everyone's happy mood, please forgive me. Do you still want the monthly votes next month? Of course. Do you want them like this month? Of course not. I'm not saying that I'll die of exhaustion. Seeing all of you working so hard, I also find it odd. Having said all this, to prevent some readers from thinking that Tomcat was cocky after getting first place, I'll first say that in May, I updated nearly 180,000 words. That was considered diligent. In June, I guarantee that the number of updates won't be lower than that. It will exceed 180,000 words. That's considered a good attitude, right? I'll write another chapter in a while. Good attitude, right? I'll apply for leave tomorrow, but I'll use the Saturday the day after tomorrow to exchange for leave. Good attitude, right? Finally, I'll repeat, I'm very happy. I hope all of you are happy too. Then, I'll bring my leader, no, it should be my leader, me, and my family's cat and dog, to give a deep bow to everyone to express my gratitude. I promise everyone that I won't be much more diligent in the future, but I'll definitely write better books. I wish everyone a good night and a happy new month. It's June. Let me end with a sentence that everyone is so familiar with that they're sick of it. Please cast your precious monthly votes. Thank you. Another bow. Don't worry, there won't be a third. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian to cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:51. Before the fog dispersed, a figure passed through the fog and arrived in front of Monk Guanhai, leaving a dim shadow in his eyes. This made the young Buddhist powerhouse's eyes, which had always been calm, finally show signs of nervousness. Looking at Ning Ke, who broke through the fog, Monk Guanhai did two things. He separated his palms and pressed the thumb of his right hand into his palm, changing from the Wisdom King Mudra to the Heart Mudra. His left hand changed from vertical to horizontal, with his palm facing forward. He faced Ning Ke in the most powerful posture of the Wisdom King Mudra. At the same time, his chest and abdomen suddenly contracted, and he took a deep breath to recite the Buddhist hymn. As the two Buddhist mudra complemented each other, the fog around him suddenly became chaotic. The milky white fog emitted the faint twilight outside the hall, as if different flowers were condensing in different areas of space. When the first syllable of the Buddhist hymn sounded from his chest and abdomen, the illusory flowers of the breath of heaven and earth suddenly condensed and began to float down. Some of the flowers broke into petals and fell like rain. Some of the flowers fell with their stems and branches, covering his body densely. These petals and branches contained the chi of heaven and earth summoned by the two handprints. They were also supported by the Buddhist hymns. Once they touched the enemy's body, they would explode and hurt him in anger. Compared to ordinary people, whether it was Taoism or Buddhism, the biggest advantage of cultivators was speed. When ordinary people did not see the light clearly, they would be pierced by the flying sword. When ordinary people did not have time to dodge, they would be smashed into bloody corpses by the rain of flowers. Of course, Monk Guanhai knew that Ning Ke was not an ordinary person, but he was sure that he had made the right choice in the face of his opponent's strange attack through the fog. Compared to ordinary people, whether it was Taoism or Buddhism, the biggest advantage of cultivators was their speed. When ordinary people did not see the light clearly, they would be pierced by the flying sword. When ordinary people did not have time to dodge, they would be smashed into bloody corpses by the rain of flowers. Of course, Monk Guanhai knew that Ning Ke was not an ordinary person, but he was sure that his choice was right in the face of his opponent's strange attack through the fog. Unfortunately, he forgot one thing. The so-called advantage of speed, or the speed of time, could only be reflected by a certain distance. At this time, Ning Ke was less than a foot away from him. When the beautiful flowers of the breath of nature slowly floated down from the fog, and Monk Guanhai's hands were still pinching his fingers to form the emblematic gesture, Ning Ke made the simplest move and punched the monk in the face. Two streams of blood spurted out. Monk Guanhai coughed painfully. The Heart Mudra in his left hand and the Wisdom King Mudra in his right hand dissipated. The breath of heaven and earth flowers that had fallen from the fog also dissipated. Finally, the fog dispersed. The clouds dispersed, and the Taoist hall became quiet and spacious again. Ning Ke slowly withdrew his fist. Monk Guanhai wiped the blood off his face. After a moment of silence, he said, "I lost." The melted ice melted into snow water and flowed slowly in the cracks of the dark wooden floor. There was a faint tinkling sound. Monk Guanhai raised his head and said with emotion, "Mr. 13 is indeed the successor of the divine talisman master. Your use of talisman Taoism is unimaginable." The 4 consecutive talismans had their own ideas, and they came in sequence. It was like the beginning and ending of a beautiful essay. The last move of abandoning talismans and using fists showed that you understood the true meaning of battle. Now that I think about it, I was indeed overestimating myself by challenging you. No wonder you were so hesitant in the beginning. I guess you didn't want me to break my spirit. Ning Ke had indeed shown mercy in the end. With the abundance of the great spirit in his body and the strength of his body, how could he only make Guanhai's nose bleed when he punched Gu Shi's head like a smashed watermelon? But in fact, he had won by luck. Ning Ke had used too much psyche power to use 4 talismans in a row. However, it did not matter to him because of the psyche power in his sense of perception. The key was that the great spirit he had attached to the first 3 talismans had directly squeezed out all the great spirit in his body. After using the dispersed talisman, he had forcefully broken through the fog and launched a surprise attack. His body was already extremely weak. If Monk Guanhai had not chosen to use the most powerful Buddhist cultivation method to deal with it, but instead used his body to resemble the solemn Dharma idol of the Wisdom King to strengthen his defense, he would have been the first to fall if he had held on for a while longer. Ninkei looked at Monk Guanhai, who had sincerely admitted defeat, in front of him. He secretly felt lucky. Although this monk from the Lang Temple had a high state, he had been living in seclusion in the mountain temple to study and read Buddhist scriptures all year round. It seemed that he did not know why to fight. He suddenly remembered what Yi Hongyu had said in the basket when they left the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. Most cultivators in the world do not know how to fight. It is very easy to defeat them. It is a pity that my cultivation is not enough. I did not see the legendary no-boundary spirit of the Academy. Monk Guanhai was still sincerely reviewing the previous battle. The more sincere his attitude was, the more Ning Kei felt his face burn. He thought that when he refused to fight with him on the street, it was not because he was afraid of bullying the weak and dampening his spirit, but because he was afraid of losing and dampening his spirit. Ning Kei reached out and helped him up. Monk Guanhai thanked him and then said with slight confusion, "But I still don't understand how you avoided the raindrop that I flicked out. You should know that the raindrop was soaked with my fighting spirit." Ning Kei smiled slightly and did not say anything. He slowly recovered his spirit. Monk Guanhai looked at his expression and could not help but say with shame, "I am presumptuous. He thought that Ning Kei must have used some kind of unique skill of the Academy to quietly block his attack. That kind of unique skill was probably at the same level as the no-boundary spirit. Wasn't he prying into the secrets of the Academy by asking so rashly? Ning Kei smiled and shook his head. He helped him walk out of the hall. In fact, only he knew how he had responded to the raindrop. He did not do anything. He just lowered his head and let the raindrop fall on his forehead and then seep into his hair. That raindrop did indeed contain a very powerful force. However, Ning Kei had always been very thick-skinned, especially after joining the devil. The Taoists outside the main hall of the Southern Gate Taoist Temple had been silently watching the inside of the hall. This was the first battle of the new generation of disciples of the Academy after entering the human realm. Some of the white-haired old Taoists could not help but think of the Academy madman with the surname come many years ago, who rode a little black donkey in a chong and caused a bloody storm. Their emotions were very complicated. The door of the Taoist temple had been tightly shut, and no one dared to peep from the window. The spectators only saw the fire raging in the hall, and the dryness spurted out from the cracks in the window. Then there was the sound of rain, and water flowed out from the door. Then there was a chill coming from the hall, and it seemed to suppress the winter outside. Then there was the Buddha's aura and the solemn Buddhist hymns, and then everything returned to silence. There was silence in the hall. No one knew what the final result was. Did Mr. 13 of the Academy win, or did the last disciple of the Elder of Lang Temple win? Mo Shanshan stood under an old tree outside the hall and looked at the Taoist temple. When Ning Kei consecutively used 4 talismans, her eyes suddenly became extremely bright. When the Buddhist hymn sounded in the hall and the light of Buddha could be seen faintly, her eyes began to show a look of worry. When the Taoist temple returned to silence, she had probably guessed the outcome and returned to calmness. Because she knew that people like Ning Kei might be defeated or killed, but they would never be defeated or killed quietly. The door of the Taoist temple opened, and Ning Kei slowly walked out, supporting Monk Guanhai. The Taoists watching the battle could not help but be shocked when they saw this scene, especially when they saw the blood on Monk Guanhai's face. They thought that Ning Kei was indeed the one who entered the human realm from the Academy, and he could actually win so easily. Of course, because of his relationship with Master Yen Sei, Ning Kei could also be considered half a member of the South School of Haoyin. Therefore, seeing him win, the Taoists in the Southern Gate Temple could not help but show a look of joy on their faces. After a brief conversation with He Ming-chi, Ning Kei and Monk Guanhai said a lot of useless things. He said affectionately that he would personally attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival at the Lang Temple next year, and that he would definitely report to them at that time. Then, they said goodbye to each other and left. When they walked out of the Southern Gate Temple, the snow fell again. After walking dozens of steps along the foot of the imperial city, Ning Kei's face was slightly pale, and his hand holding the big black umbrella was trembling. Emo Shanshan looked at him and thought for a moment. Then, she reached out and put her hand through his arm. It looked like they were holding each other's arms, but in fact, she was supporting his shaky body. Emo Shanshan said, "Although Guan Hai is young, he has been carefully trained by the unfathomable elder of the Lang Temple for many years. His dharma is profound, and his cultivation is amazing. In fact, he is already one of the few powerhouses in the Buddhism sect. Today, you did not use the talisman arrow, nor did you use the bag left by Master Yensei. You only used your own cultivation to defeat him. It really surprised me." When Ning Kei heard that Guan Hai was one of the few powerhouses in the Buddhism sect, he thought to himself that he had actually defeated Guan Hai head-on. Just when he was feeling a little proud, he heard the word surprised and could not help but feel a little annoyed. He said, "Am I very weak in your eyes?" Emo Shanshan looked at the falling snow outside the umbrella and said with a smile, "Because you are indeed very weak." Ning Kei was speechless. Emo Shanshan stopped and looked at his side profile. She said seriously, "But you were very strong today." Ning Kei said seriously, "Thank you." Emo Shanshan thought of something and said confusedly, "I always feel that there is something wrong with the 3 talismans you used in the Taoist Hall. With your current cultivation state and understanding of talisman Taoism, you should not be able to write such a powerful talisman. The talisman I wrote before I saw the great blockage formation outside the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine was just like that." With her status and state, she was naturally qualified to measure other talisman masters with her own cultivation. Ning Kei then realized that the girl beside him knew far more about talisman Taoism than he did. He could not help but feel a little uneasy. He thought that if she found out that he had used some strange method on those talisman papers, or even found out that he had used the methods of the Devil's Doctrine, that is not a talisman. Emo Shanshan reached out and took a snowflake. Watching the crystal snowflake slowly melt in her palm, she said, "I understand. You are using your intent to make a talisman. Is this the legendary no-boundary spirit of the Academy?" Although Ning Kei was a student of the 2nd floor of the Academy, he really did not know what the no-boundary spirit of the Academy was. However, at this time, since Emo Shanshan did not think that he was using the Great Spirit to replace the Qi of heaven and earth, he would certainly not explain. However, thinking of the 4 words, "no boundary spirit of the Academy," he could not help but think of the 4 words he saw on the stone outside the wooden door when he climbed the mountain that day. He silently thought that there was a deep meaning in these 4 words. End of 4 chapters. This month has come to a successful end. Thank you very much for your support. There is a separate chapter in front. You can read it. In the separate chapter, I am very grateful to everyone. Today is off. See you tomorrow. I bow again to thank everyone. Good night. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 352. The Night Shrouded Chong and City. The everlasting lamps in the corner towers of the Imperial Palace radiated a yellowish light to the ground. The dim light reflected the white snowflakes dancing slowly in front of the red palace wall. It was a very beautiful scene. This was the most remote part of the moat. The snowflakes falling from a night sky disappeared silently when they fell on the surface of the moat. In this quiet environment, the sound of their feet stepping on the loose snow became clearer and clearer. Emo Shanshan gently brushed away the fluttering hair in front of her eyes and looked at the dancing snowflakes in front of the red palace wall. She said softly, "The great river is far away in the south. It's almost impossible to see snow there." Ning Kei thought of the distant country where it was like spring all year round and said with yearning, "I really want to visit it if I have the chance." The great river is small in size and has a small population. Its national power is very weak. To the north is the powerful South Gene, which has always had a bad relationship with Ueluan. However, it has always been able to maintain peace and even prosperity for hundreds of years. Do you know why? Ning Ke shook his head. Mo Shanshan looked at the Tang Imperial Palace in front of her and said calmly, because there is the Tang Empire and this Imperial Palace in the world. Because the Great River has been on good terms with the Tang Empire for generations. That's why the Great River has always been under the protection of the Tang Empire, even though we are separated by thousands of mountains and rivers. Ning Ke was very clear that what she said was the truth, but he did not understand why she suddenly mentioned it. Both the South Gene and Yuan know very well that if they go too far and their troops really invade the Great River, the Tang Empire and the Emperor in this imperial palace will not stand idly by. That's why other countries in the world think that the Tang Empire is an ambitious hegemon and the source of war. Only the people of the Great River don't think so. For us, as long as the Tang Empire exists, this dangerous and chaotic world will be peaceful. Mo Shanshan looked at him and said with a smile, the world of cultivators is actually inseparable from the secular world. Only by being strong can you ensure the peace of the Tang Empire and the Great River. What you need to do now is to strengthen yourself and make the Tang Empire stronger than before. Hearing this, Ning Ke finally understood. At noon on the street outside the Ministry of Rites, Shanshan probably guessed that he was hesitating and wavering, so she used the snowflakes outside the palace walls to comfort him. He shook his head and said, "Thank you for your explanation. In fact, I've almost figured it out. If you want the world to be at peace, you can't just avoid fighting. I just don't understand why a Buddhist master like Monk Guanhai can't get rid of those foolish thoughts. Why does he have to come and fight with me? When people see a tall palace wall, they always want to go around the wall to see what's behind it. When they see a mountain, they always want to climb it to see what kind of scenery it has." Mo Shanshan pointed at the palace walls on the other side of the moat and said, "Cultivators are also people. They also have curiosity and yearning, and because of their pride, this feeling will become even stronger." Hearing this, Ning Ke thought of the state of mind when he first heard Chun Pippi talk about the real powerhouses in the world. He thought of the heroic attitude he had when he saw the mountains on the other side of the sea of clouds after he successfully reached the top. For cultivators, the end of the long road of cultivation is the legendary unknown place. They are in awe of the unknown place, but they are filled with the desire to approach or even surpass it. Jishou Abbey and Xinkong Temple have nowhere to go. They can only see the academy, so they have to try to climb the mountain of the academy. In the light snow, Ning Ke and Mo Shanshan held the big black umbrella and walked forward. The topic about the academy's entry into the human realm and the challenge was over. They looked at the thin ice floating on the surface of the moat and the snowflakes that disappeared as soon as they entered the water. They often kept silent for a long time and occasionally discussed about talisman Taoism and calligraphy when they felt something. They had been through life and death together in the wilderness for many days and had developed a tacit understanding. Recently, they often traveled side by side in Chang'an City. This tacit understanding gradually penetrated into every part of their body and even their soul through the gentle touch of their shoulders, and the girl's hair occasionally drifted past Ning Ke's nose. Their common interest in talisman Taoism and calligraphy made it easy for them to perceive the intention of each other's gaze and gesture. That happy and peaceful emotion gradually emerged. When they walked to a certain bridge in the moat, the snow gradually stopped. Ning Ke stopped and put away the big black umbrella. Mo Shanshan took a few steps forward and then looked back at him. With this movement, her black hair flowed down from her shoulders like a waterfall. Her white dress looked especially beautiful in front of the red palace wall, just like the falling snowflakes earlier. Ning Ke looked at her beautiful face and tightly pursed red lips. He found that her eyes did not drift away at all, but were unprecedentedly calm and focused. He could not help but feel inexplicably nervous. Mo Shanshan looked at him quietly and said, "In the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, I said that I like you. Ning Ke was slightly startled and squeezed out a sentence with some difficulty. I remember. Mo Shanshan raised her head slightly, and her slightly round face looked extraordinarily stubborn and proud. I also want you to like me. Ning Ke looked through the girl's shoulder and looked at the red palace wall in the night. Then he found that there was nothing to look at. Then he looked at the slowly flowing moat under the bridge and found that the river in the night was like ink. There was indeed nothing to look at. So he had to look at her face again and said seriously, "This is a very fair thing." Mo Shanshan slowly lowered her head and looked at the tip of her shoes in front of her skirt. She said in a low voice, "Then do you like me?" This time, Ning Ke really looked at the palace wall behind the girl. That was because the red palace wall was higher than his line of sight and occupied most of the area in the night. It could serve as a very good background wall. Life was like a question. There were all kinds of fanatics. Mo Shanshan was a calligraphy fanatic, so she was also a question. Moreover, this was probably the most difficult question he had ever encountered in his life. Therefore, he needed to think about it seriously and repeatedly project certain images in his mind to determine the answer to this question. On the shore of the waist-thin blue sea, he saw the girl swaying gently in the wind on the branches in the early morning, and the touch of blue around her waist. Then he saw her undisciplined and indifferent eyes, beautiful eyebrows, cute round face like a bun, saw her casting half-divine talisman, saw her falling from the sky, and then they traveled together again, talking about calligraphy and talisman Taoism until the palace entered the northern wilderness again. They didn't walk alone in the snow. They once cooked fish by the lake. They staggered forward among the rocks in the mountains and valleys. He carried her on his back, and she guided him. She said that she liked his big black horse and liked his calligraphy. Then she said that she liked him in front of the mountain of bones and corpses when she was dying. These images flashed quickly in Ning Ke's mind and on the red palace wall in front of him. Those feelings that he had once touched and those things that he had occasionally thought about appeared again. He couldn't confirm more things, but at least he was absolutely sure of one thing. And he actually let a girl say that sentence first. He felt that it was wrong to drag the time, even for a moment. He looked at Shanshan in front of him and looked at her slightly trembling eyelashes. He said with certainty, "I like you." Mo Shanshan's body stiffened slightly. She didn't raise her head to look at him, but walked directly to the side of the bridge. She lowered her head and looked at the ink-like moat quietly. She looked at the floating ice in the river, and a shy smile gradually appeared on her indifferent face. The battle between Ning Ke and monk Guanhai in the main hall of the Southern Gate Taoist Temple did not cause any disturbance in the secular world. In the eyes of the ordinary people living in the streets and alleys, cultivators were like the cultivators in Ning Ke's eyes in the past. They were all immortals who lived in the wind and drank dew and flew around the clouds. Whenever immortals fought, as long as there was no disaster, mortals were usually not willing to care. In fact, they didn't know about these things. But for the various sects in the cultivation world, the result of the battle had a far-reaching impact. The defeat of Guanhai, the last disciple of the elder of the Lang Temple, proved once again that the academy was the highest peak in the world and also made Ning Ke, Mr. 13 of the academy, enter the ranks of the so-called powerhouses. Monk Guanhai lived in seclusion in the deep mountains behind the Lang Temple in his early years. He was not famous, but even I would have a hard time defeating him. I didn't expect Ning Ke to be able to defeat him. It seems that he has improved very quickly recently. I think now, no one on the Peach Mountains still thinks that he defeated Long Qing twice because of luck. In a dark room in the West Hill Divine Palace, Yi Hongyu looked at the dossier she had just received. A smile appeared on her beautiful face. For some reason, she did not wear her iconic red dress, but a simple Taoist robe. A subordinate of the judicial department of the Divine Hall heard her words and could not help but frown slightly. He retorted in a low voice, "No one can deny that Mr. 13 has improved very quickly. But it is definitely luck that he defeated the prince twice in a row. If the prince was not at the critical moment of breaking the realm on the snow cliff, how could he have succeeded in his plot?" Yi Hongyu looked at the subordinate quietly and said, "Plot is also a kind of battle. Since you have become an enemy, Do you still expect the enemy to be tolerant and gracious? As long as it is a battle, it is fair. And you must remember that Hao Yin is also fair. A shameless guy like Ning Ke can become a student of the second floor of the academy and be chosen by Uncle Yin, say, as a successor. Then he must have something worth learning other than luck. The subordinate of the judicial department did not dare to refute anymore. He lowered his head and said yes. He went out and walked to a tree by the cliff. He glanced at the simple stone house and revealed a sneer on his face. He lowered his voice and said to his companion, "The Divine Hall has suffered a serious setback in this trip to the wilderness. In this trip to the wilderness, the Divine Hall has suffered a serious setback. Prince Long Qing may have died. Our Grand Master Yi has encountered a strong enemy and was forced to lower her state. I'm afraid that she will never enter the knowing destiny state in this life. But she still shows such confidence in front of us. Doesn't she know that this is pitiful and ridiculous?" Yi Hongyu was indeed seriously injured in the trip to the wilderness, especially when Lien Sheng used the practice of Tao Dai and forced her to lower her state to survive. It had caused irreversible damage to her cultivation. But she was after all the Tao addict, and her cultivation state was still in the upper see-through state. How could she not hear the whispers outside the house? However, she did not get angry. She just gently tidied up her wide green Taoist robe and then silently closed her eyes. I was happy the whole day yesterday, but I suddenly withered today. Maybe I was too relaxed and felt extremely uncomfortable. It was even more uncomfortable than when I tried my best at the end of last month. And I happened to be writing this terrible plot, so I actually wrote for 6 hours. It's so scary. This is the only chapter today. Don't worry, I won't wither. I will definitely write more tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 353. The West Hill Divine Palace commanded the hundreds of millions of believers of Haotian Taoism in the world and worshiped the spirit. They needed to stand on the soil of reality, especially the judicial department, which was the most realistic place in the Divine Hall. Yi Hongyu's future as the Grand Master was covered with a layer of gloomy dust after her repeated failures in the wilderness. That was why her subordinates, who used to be in awe of her, dared to talk about her in private now, and she became quiet. There was a simple Taoist temple deep in the mountains in the south. Not many people knew about this Taoist temple, and the old plaque outside the Taoist temple said Jisho. Different from the West Hill Divine Palace that ruled the world, the Jisho Abbey, hidden behind the history of Haotian Taoism, did not care about the secular world. There were 7 huts by the lake in the Jisho Abbey, which enshrined the legendary 7 volumes of the Tomes of Arcane. The 4th hut was already in a state of emptiness. It had never been able to bring back the Ming hand scroll that was lost in the wilderness. The thatch on the eaves seemed to be withered and decayed. The other 6 huts seemed to be infected by the aura of the Tomes of Arcane. The golden thatch on the eaves seemed to be carved out of gold, reflecting the sunlight and exuding a sense of luxury and solemnity, which made people want to kneel on the ground and never rise again. On the agarwood table in the first hut by the lake, there was an ancient book with a cover as black as blood. This ancient book was so thick that it looked like a piece of natural black bloodstone. It was the hand scroll of the Tomes of Arcane. The black cover and snow-white pages made this heavenly book release a feeling that made people's hearts palpitate. The hand scroll on the table had been opened, and it was even more likely that it had never been closed for thousands of years. The first page was completely blank, and the second page was on the right. The name of the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, was clearly displayed at the top. Not far from the horizontal were the 2 words Jun Mo, and around it were words like Yitang. A cool breeze blew in from the window and flipped the pages of the book like an invisible hand. It quickly flipped through the heavenly tome and came to the last page. Last summer, Ning Ke's name had appeared here after he successfully climbed to the top of the academy and comprehended talisman Taoism on a stormy night. But now his name had disappeared. The paper was as white as snow. The wind from the lake lingered between the beams and pillars of the hut. When it met the walls, it turned back and flowed to the agarwood table. It began to turn the pages again, but this time it was turning from the back to the front. The pages of the book were turning very fast. Occasionally, he could see 2 or 3 names clearly, such as Liu Qingchun. But most of the time, he could only vaguely see a few single characters, such as Lu and He. The wind on the lake flipped the hand scroll and finally came to the position of the first few thin sheets of paper. The paper was densely covered with names, which looked as beautiful and complicated as the patterns of flowers and plants. Prince Longqing's name was in the corner of the page, but the handwriting was so dim that it seemed that it would seep into the soft paper at any time and disappear. Tang Xiaodong's name appeared in another corner of the page. The handwriting was erratic and sloppy. Mo Shanshan's name appeared in the middle of the paper. The handwriting was quiet and smooth. The names of Wang Jinglu, Monk Guanhai, and many others could be seen on the paper, making it look a little messy. Only the top of the paper, near the edge, was blank. Only Yi Hongyu's name was in that blank space. Yi Hongyu's name appeared lonely and proud there. The handwriting was so thick and dense that it seemed that it was going to emerge from the paper and fly away with the wind from the lake. The top stroke of the word "you" had even gone beyond the edge of the page. It was like a sharp Taoist sword stabbing into the front page. Ning Kei's name appeared inconspicuously in the bottom right corner of the paper. In the early morning, on the meadow outside the academy in the southern suburbs of Chong, and Mo Shanshan looked at Ning Kei and said softly, "I'll write to you when I return to the Great River. But your name doesn't look good no matter how I write it." Looking at the girl's eyelashes shining in the morning light, Ning Kei said, "We're not leaving Chong and right away. Why does it feel like we're saying goodbye? We'll write to each other when you return to Ink Lake. But I'm thinking that I can take Sang Sang to the Great River to see you when the headmaster of the academy comes back." Mo Shanshan lowered her head and looked at her shoes that were sticking out of her skirt. She thought to herself that this person probably never noticed her habit of speaking. However, what right did she have to change his habit? The two walked on the meadow. Under Ning Kei's introduction, Mo Shanshan followed him to visit the academy. Then they walked through the wetland and the old library, through the thick fog, and came to the cliff. Just like when Ning Kei came to the back mountain of the academy for the first time, the calligraphy addict was also shocked by the beautiful cliff, the peaceful lake, the mountains, and the waterfall in the distance. She looked at the scenery in front of her and said, "Is this the real academy?" Ning Kei said, "If the second floor of the academy is the real academy, then this is it." Mo Shanshan said softly, "For cultivators, the unknown place is above the clouds and out of the secular world. They can't touch it. Although the academy is the only holy land that connects both worlds, how many people can come here and see the scenery with their own eyes? I didn't expect that after meeting you, I would enter the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine first and then come to the back mountain of the academy. I'm really lucky." Ning Kei stood beside her and looked at the lake and mountains in front of him. Hearing her soft sigh, he felt proud and happy. He said, "You met me, and there will be many more lucky things in the future." Although he said it casually, there was a hint of sweetness in it. If they stayed together for a long time, there would naturally be more. Mo Shanshan was not used to this situation. She lowered her head shyly and said nothing. Ning Kei had always been thick-skinned, but he was not embarrassed at all. He took her to Mirror Lake and said, "I will take you to see Seventh Sister." Except for her, the other senior brothers all like to play hide-and-seek. It is really difficult to find her. Mo Shanshan thought to herself, "Is this the sect to visit?" She could not help but feel a little nervous. She looked down at the mountain road under her feet and slowly followed him. She said softly, "Is it inappropriate for you to bring outsiders into the academy?" As a man, the most appropriate answer at this time should be, "You're not an outsider." However, Ning Kei was thick-skinned and good at talking, but he had no experience in love and seriously lacked ability. Hearing Shanshan's worry, he answered honestly, "Eldest brother has already taken you as his sworn sister. What is there to be afraid of in the academy? And it is eldest brother who asked me to bring you here today. Otherwise, I would not be so bold." When he crossed the Mirror Lake, he greeted seventh sister and chatted with her for a while. Then he went to visit fourth brother and sixth brother in the iron-making house by the stream. Sixth brother, who was used to being half-naked, was startled when he saw Ning K suddenly bringing a beautiful little girl in. He hurriedly put on a coat faster than he swung the hammer. Fourth brother, on the other hand, sat silently by the window and deduced, as if he had seen nothing. The iron forging house was unbearably hot and full of steam. Thinking that Shan Shan was after all a girl who loved beauty, Ning Ke only wanted to talk with her for a while and then leave. Unexpectedly, when Shan Shan saw fourth brother's deduction by the window, she refused to leave. Instead, she walked over and squatted down to carefully look at the talisman lines on the sand table. Her expression became more and more serious. Ning Ke's expression slightly changed and walked to the window to watch together. After a long time, fourth brother raised his head and glanced at the girl squatting beside the sand table. He indifferently asked, "You also know talisman?" Asking calligraphy addict if she knew talisman was equivalent to asking a butcher if he knew how to kill pigs, or asking a hunter if he knew how to walk the mountain road. Ning Ke knew fourth brother's character and was worried that Shan Shan would be angry. He hurriedly said, "Senior brother, she is calligraphy addict." "Oh, so you're a calligraphy addict." Fourth brother looked at Mo Shan Shan and repeated, "Then do you know talisman?" Ning Ke was completely speechless. Among the three addicts in the world, Mo Shan Shan had always been known as a quiet and virtuous woman. She was not angry at all, but just a little confused. She looked up at Ning Ke and remembered his answer in the wilderness that day. She could not help but smile and said, "A little." Fourth brother pointed at Ning Ke and asked, "How are you compared with him?" Mo Shan Shan did not think and said without hesitation, "Much better than him." Ning Ke became more speechless and felt his self-esteem was hurt. Fourth brother nodded with satisfaction and said, "Then you are indeed qualified to see my deduction." Mo Shan Shan looked at the talisman lines moving slowly on the sand table and asked uncertainly, "Is this really deduction algorithm?" Fourth brother said, "If it weren't for the deduction algorithm, how could you be so fascinated by it?" Mo Shan Shan said in surprise, "But my master said that the river and mountain sandbox deduction algorithm has been lost for many years." Fourth brother shook his head and said, "The river and mountain sandbox deduction algorithm was indeed lost in the Kaiyuan period of the Tang Empire. But less than 40 years later, Ing Shanren, the seventh patriarch of Black Ink Garden, and a sage of the academy, studied it for 6 years and re-established the standard of deduction algorithm. Later, the two sages spent their whole lives to recast the river and mountain sandbox. Since your master, the master of calligrapher, is the successor of Ing Shanren, how could he not know these things?" Mo Shan Shan stared blankly at the ordinary sand table in front of her, wondering if it was really the legendary river and mountain sandbox. Looking at the two lines on the sand table that seemed to be always parallel, but actually disturbed each other, she frowned slightly and said, "Is it deducing the initial value between the fixed talisman intent and the fluctuation of Numa?" Fourth brother didn't expect that the little girl could see through the content of his deduction with just a glance. His expression slightly changed, and he said with great interest, "Do you also study this?" Mo Shan Shan looked at the sand table attentively and said, "A little, but I didn't think that I could deduce it out of thin air." Fourth brother looked at her with a look of approval. He really appreciated the girl's concentration when studying talisman Taoism. He turned to Ning Ke and said unhappily, "Hurry up and bring a stool here." "Do you want Miss Shan Shan to squat like this all the time?" Ning Ke felt very innocent, but he continued to be silent and brought a stool over. Mo Shan Shan didn't thank him or even look at him. She directly sat on the stool, holding her chin and focusing on the sand table. She occasionally discussed with fourth brother and then continued to focus on the sand table. The next chapter should be written at about 11 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 354. Although Ning Ke was quite talented in talisman Taoism, He was still far away from fourth brother and Mo Shanshan in the aspect of cultivation. Moreover, he could not understand the content of the discussion between Mo Shanshan and fourth brother at his current state. He was bored standing by the window and found that no one was willing to pay attention to him, so he had to leave. Walking to the back of the iron-making house, he bowed down and washed his face with the stream water to sober up his mind. Then he sat by the stream and stared blankly at the slowly rotating water wheel. It was not because he felt lost after being forgotten, but because he was thinking about how he should continue after he said he liked her in front of the red wall in the snowy night 2 days ago. Obviously, Mo Shanshan's attitude towards him was as calm and indifferent as before, so he should not be too anxious. However, why did he always feel that he had forgotten something very important? I heard that you brought the calligraphy attic to the academy. A voice suddenly rang out from behind Ning Kei, startling him. He looked back and was about to say something when he saw Chun Pippi walking towards him with his hands clasped behind his back. Because according to his understanding of this guy, Chun Pippi would definitely make fun of him if he knew that he had brought Mo Shanshan to the academy. He would never be as serious as he was now. Ning Kei said, "Don't think of using this to attack me. This is eldest brother's idea." Chun Pippi looked at the man standing beside him, facing the stream with his hands still behind his back. His round body actually had a bit of an imposing aura. Chun Pippi heard him say slowly, "Have you thought it through?" Ning Kei asked in surprise, "Think what through?" Chun Pippi looked at him and said seriously, "Think it through. You want to be with Mo Shanshan." Ning Kei said sarcastically, "Don't lose all confidence in women because you were bullied by Yi Hong Yu when you were young, and then you want to break up all the couples in the world, okay? That's too pitiful." Chun Pippi was about to say something when Ning Kei suddenly leaned back and looked at the two hands behind his back. Seeing Chun Pippi's two hands, which were obviously more red and swollen than a pig's trotter, Ning Kei was shocked and gasped. He jumped up and asked with concern, "What's wrong with you?" Chun Pippi looked at the grass and wildflowers on the other side of the stream and said slowly with endless vicissitudes, "When you came back with eldest brother that day, I complained about second brother to eldest brother." Ning Kei looked at him and nodded, saying, "And then?" Chun Pippi raised his hands, which looked like braised pork trotters, and said with a sigh, "Then there was no then." Ning Kei looked at his hand and couldn't help shivering. He asked uncertainly, "Did second brother do it?" Chun Pippi nodded. Ning Kei said angrily, "How could second brother be so cruel? How can you beat people up for no reason?" Chun Pippi turned his head to look at him and said with slightly wet eyes, "Youngest brother, you actually dared to scold second brother for me. I'm finally sure that you are really a good person. However, second brother brought out the rules of the academy, so it can't be said to be without reason. I've also learned the academy's rules. Where is there such a rule that says you can't complain? But there's a rule that says you can't lie. Did you lie in the old brush pen shop that day?" Well, actually it wasn't a lie. It was just that I exaggerated a little when I said 11th brother ate flowers. How exaggerated is it? 11th brother didn't eat all the flowers he saw. He also picked the delicious ones to eat. Ning Kei said incredulously, "Just because of this, second brother punished you with the academy's rules?" Chun Pippi looked at him sadly and said, "Second brother is a gentleman. He does things strictly according to the rules." Ning Kei said with emotion, "Why do I feel that it doesn't make sense?" Chun Pippi looked at him and said seriously, "Remember, as long as the headmaster of the academy and eldest brother don't have any objections, then the only one who is qualified to be reasonable in the academy is second brother. Only his words are reasonable." Ning Kei nodded to show that he had kept this truth firmly in his heart. Then he gently patted Chun Pippi's shoulder to comfort him. He thought that it was not necessarily safe to stay in the back of the mountain of the academy. In this way, he felt much better when he thought that he was thrown into the secular world to fight for his life. At this moment, Chun Pippi's body suddenly stiffened. Then he broke away from Ning Kei's hand and turned around without hesitation to run along the stream to the depths of the back of the mountain. His chubby body was like a falling leaf, and he instantly disappeared in the dense forest of the mountain. No trace of him could be seen. Ning Ke stared blankly at the place where he had disappeared, thinking that he was indeed a genius with the highest state among the younger generation. His physical strength was obviously terrible, but he could float away by borrowing the chi of heaven and earth with a wave of his academy uniform. I heard that you brought the calligraphy addict to the academy? Another voice suddenly sounded behind Ning Ke and asked the same question, but his reaction was very different from before. First, his body slightly stiffened, and then he quickly turned around and bowed to the ground. He answered very respectfully, "Second brother, this is eldest brother's idea, but I do want to bring her around." Second senior brother nodded. Ning Ke straightened up and forced himself not to look at the ancient crown on second brother's head. He looked calm, but in fact, his academy uniform was already dripping with sweat. He knew that he was right to add the last sentence. Otherwise, second brother would mistakenly think that he was using eldest brother's name to suppress him. Then, second brother would probably use the principles of the academy to educate him. No one knew what second brother was thinking. His expression was a little strange. He looked at Ning Ke and pondered for a moment before asking, "Do you know why eldest brother wants to take the calligraphy addict as his sworn sister?" This question was not easy to answer. In fact, Ning Ke did not know why eldest brother had agreed to this matter with a smile on the horse carriage in the wilderness that day. Of course, a girl like Emo Shanshan was worthy of everyone's affection. But the back of the mountain of the academy was after all not the secular world, and eldest brother's identity was even more extraordinary. It was a little sudden. This matter seems to be a little complicated. Second brother walked to the stream and looked back at him. He said, "You did well in the battle of the Southern Gate Temple." This was the second time in a row that he had been praised by senior brother. Ning Ke laughed happily. Then he thought of the academy's no-boundary spirit after the battle with Monk Guanhai. He could not help but ask curiously, "Senior brother, when I climbed the mountain that day, I saw the 4 words a gentleman does not fight outside the wooden door. What did Prince Long Qing see?" Long Qing saw the 4 words a gentleman does not fight. Second brother looked at him and said, "This is a sentence that the headmaster once said. A gentleman does not fight, but must shoot. Since Long Qing wanted to fight with you, it was natural that he would be shot to death by you." Hearing this, Ning Ke thought to himself that the words left by the headmaster of academy on the stone outside the wooden door had already hinted at what might happen in the future. He was shocked and could not help but feel infinite yearning and admiration. At this moment, second brother was thinking about that extremely troublesome matter. Looking at the admiring expression on Ning Ke's face, his heart slightly moved. He said, "If you want to understand the headmaster's state, you need to concentrate on cultivation all your life." Ning Ke nodded subconsciously. Second brother said again, "The headmaster has never married in his life. Therefore, if you want to reach that state, you can't be bothered by the affairs between men and women. It's better not to think about marriage for the time being." Ning Ke said with a slight surprise, "Not for the time being?" Second brother said seriously, "Of course, it's better not to think about it forever." Ning Ke was shocked and did not care that it was a very dangerous thing to reason with second brother. He waved his hand and said, "If I don't get married in my life, won't I become a poor guy like my headmaster in the future? I can't do that." In the evening, Ning Ke and Emo Shanshan left the back of the mountain of the academy. The people in the back of the mountain of the academy gathered in second brother's small courtyard not far from the waterfall and began to hold a very important meeting. The number of people in this meeting was very orderly. Except for the scholars, everyone in the back of the mountain of the academy had arrived. Whether it was those who were playing zither and flute in the forest, or those who were playing chess under the pine tree, they all showed up and found a corner to sit in. Usually, they would not be so well-behaved, because most of the time, even second brother could not catch them from those remote corners of the back of the mountain. However, it was different today because eldest brother had returned. As long as eldest brother was in the academy, no matter where they hid, whether they pretended to be stones in the forest, squirrels in the pine tree, or grass in the flowers, they would be easily found. Nothing major happened in the academy recently. As for Ning Kei's entry into the human realm and his victory over Monk Guanhai, the successor of the Lang Temple's elder, no one would take it seriously. Because in their opinion, even though youngest brother's state was a little low, he was still their youngest brother. How could he lose to others? Beigong Weiyang put his arm around eldest brother's shoulder and said bitterly, "Dear eldest brother, what on earth happened today that requires such a big commotion? Hurry up and finish talking. My tune has just reached an important part." Fifth brother looked at eldest brother and said impatiently, "Yes, senior brother. We have already welcomed you on the day you came back. What's the matter today?" Eighth brother is about to lose the game of chess. We can't let him take the opportunity to act shamelessly. Eighth brother sneered and said, "I think it's you who is about to lose. Why don't we go back now and continue?" The small courtyard was noisy. Eldest brother looked at the crowd helplessly and persuaded, Don't worry. Everything can be explained slowly." At this moment, a palm slammed heavily on the table. There was a loud clap. The room suddenly became silent. Everyone lowered their heads as the second senior brother's cold gaze slowly moved over. Eldest brother frowned slightly and said, "Junimo, don't be angry." Hearing this, second brother quickly stood up and said respectfully, "Senior brother is right. Junimo is wrong." This was the food chain in the back of the mountain of the academy. The second brother killed all the younger brothers and sisters. All the younger brothers and sisters were close to the eldest brother without fear or even contempt. But in front of the eldest brother, the second brother became a quail. Chin Pippi gently blew on his swollen hands. Looking at second brother, who was standing obediently, he snickered and thought, "Junimo, you also have this day." However, under second brother's oppressive gaze, finally no one dared to say that they wanted to leave. No one dared to say another word. The room suddenly became much quieter, and even the sound of pen nib sliding on the paper could be faintly heard. Third sister, the female professor, Yu Lian, was concentrating on the hairpin-style, small regular script. It seemed that everything that happened had nothing to do with her. "Today, I asked all the younger brothers and sisters to come here because something happened recently." Eldest brother said, after youngest brother entered the human realm, there were many speculations in the world. Many ministers from the imperial court have entered the palace to see if they could appoint a marriage. The heavenly palace sent someone to the foot of the mountain to convey His Majesty's will. His Majesty wants to know what the Academy thinks. Chin Pippi was slightly stunned and said, "What is this? Alliance marriage or inferior marriage?" Eldest brother looked at him and said seriously, "Youngest brother is a man, so it can't be regarded as inferior marriage. But in my opinion, this kind of thing is really boring. I think neither the teacher nor youngest brother will have this idea. After all, cultivators should get along with other cultivators, and it also depends on youngest brother." Eldest brother finally said, "Today, the calligraphy addict has entered the mountain and met everyone. What do you think of her? I have a very good impression of Shan Shan, so I'm very happy to see her and youngest brother get along well. Of course, you don't have to care about my opinion and my relationship with her." Hearing this, the people in the room began to discuss curiously. They thought to themselves, why would eldest senior brother be so cautious about the matter of youngest junior brother finding a wife? He even asked their opinions. Only the seventh sister noticed that after hearing this, the second brother's expression was obviously a little displeased. "I haven't even eaten a grain of rice. I only wrote 2 chapters in 8 hours. I really admire myself." Bitter smile. "It turns out that I am a bitch." To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 355. As if to make a footnote to eldest brother's words about the harmony of the zither and the harp, 10th brother Shimanbua lightly plucked the zither strings, and 9th brother Beigong Weiyang lightly tapped the flute with his fingers. The sound of the zither resounded in the room like flowing water, and along with the sound of the music, everyone was enthusiastically discussing. Ning Kei and Miss Situ from Yunhui General's family are very close. If the palace wants to appoint a marriage, it will probably be her. But old Chancellor appreciates Ning Kei's calligraphy, so Jin Wucai is also possible. But if you look back carefully, Princess Liu also had a lot of contact with him, and their relationship is very close now. Why do I always feel that appointing a marriage is very disgusting? Whether it is called a marriage or a prostitute, it always feels that youngest brother is sold to the House of Red Sleeves, and there is no Mistress Jian in those mansions. Ha ha, it's not as despicable as you think. According to eldest brother's intention, he just wants to avoid publicly refuting his majesty. So he wants to settle the marriage for youngest brother before the palace does. Speaking of which, there hasn't been a happy event in the back of the mountain for so many years, so it's time to have one. But I haven't seen the calligraphy addict mentioned by eldest brother, so I don't know whether she is good or bad. Youngest brother is an orphan, so we, as his senior brothers, should think more about him. Since she is from the Great River Kingdom, she must live in the Ministry of Rights. Should we go to Chang in city together tomorrow to take a look for youngest brother? Take a look? She is a girl, not an old thing. Fifth brother, I remind you that the calligraphy addict is the successor of the master of calligrapher Wang, and her state of cultivation is not weaker than yours. You have been playing chess every day these years and have been slacking on your cultivation. I'm afraid you are no match for her at all. If you annoy her, be careful of entering Chang in city and not being able to come out. Eldest senior brother shook his head as he listened to the idiotic words of these people. Seventh sister swept the leftover melon seed peels into a small basket, looked up at his expression, and said with a smile, I think the calligraphy addict is not bad. Her little face is quite round. If you marry her, it should be comfortable to pinch her face every day. When Chun Pippi heard this, he thought of the torture he had suffered under seventh sister's slender fingers all these years. He subconsciously raised his hand to cover his chubby cheeks, but he forgot that his hand was injured. The pain made his brows scrunch up. Holding a cup of tea, the sixth brother said honestly, there's enough steam in the smithy. That girl's temperament is very rare, and I think she's not bad. Fourth brother nodded and said, it's good that there's finally someone in the back mountain who really understands talismans. Beigong Weiyong and Shiman Buhua looked at each other, put down the zither and flute in their hands, and said with a smile, it's good that everyone is good. Since everyone says the calligraphy addict is good, we will naturally say the same. Ever since Ning Ke returned to Chang and from the wilderness, the rumors about him and Mo Shan Shan, the calligraphy addict, had spread. People in the back of the mountain of the academy also knew a little about it. Thinking that they were originally in love with each other, and with eldest brother's suggestion, everyone who had seen the calligraphy addict agreed. It was naturally a good thing. It seemed that the marriage of the youngest brother at the back of the mountain of the academy would be settled in this way. However, at this moment, a voice rang out from within the house. Not good. Seventh sister frowned slightly. Everyone looked at second brother in surprise. They did not expect that he would object. It should be known that second brother respected eldest brother the most in his life. Over the years, as long as eldest brother said something, he would absolutely do it without hesitation. Seventh sister looked at him and said sarcastically, what do you know about the love between a man and a woman? There was no extra emotion on second brother's face. He just slightly lowered his head and looked at the shadow of his ancient crown in front of him. Eldest brother looked at him and asked calmly, what's wrong with the calligraphy addict? I'm not saying that the calligraphy addict is not good. After a long silence, second brother said, it's just that if youngest brother must marry, there's a better one. Eldest brother looked at him quietly and asked, then who is it? Second brother slowly raised his head and looked straight into his eyes. He said slowly and firmly, Sang Sang. There were several senior brothers in the back of the mountain of the academy who did not know who Sang Sang was. They asked Shin Pippi and found out that in second brother's eyes, Ning Ke's little handmaiden was actually a better choice than the calligraphy addict. Fourth brother said, the academy has never been a boring place to judge people based on their status. But since the little girl named Sang Sang is youngest brother's handmaiden, it will be against the law of the Tang Empire if she gets married. It will always be troublesome. Second brother said expressionlessly, it's not troublesome. We just need to remove her registration. Fourth brother glanced at him and said nothing more. Eldest brother looked at his eyes quietly and suddenly said with a smile, "I insist on my opinion." Second brother looked back at him calmly and firmly. "I also insist on my opinion." Eldest brother said, "Most of the younger brothers and sisters support my opinion." Second brother said expressionlessly, "Senior brother, you let everyone not care about your relationship with Mo Shanshan. But the relationship already exists, so the opinions of the younger brothers and sisters are meaningless to me." Eldest brother said calmly, "Well, the opinions of the younger brothers and sisters should not be involved. But what about my opinion?" "I don't know why you have such an opinion, senior brother." Second brother looked into his eyes and asked, "I really want to know why you wanted to take the calligraphy addict as your sworn sister in the wilderness. Were you planning to do this at that time?" Eldest brother smiled and said, "I just think that Shanshan is a good girl and a good match for youngest brother." Second brother did not smile and said, "Then why can't Sang Sang be a good match for youngest brother?" Eldest brother looked at him quietly and asked thoughtfully, "What do you think about Sang Sang?" Second brother stood up and walked to the window to look at the stars above the waterfall. He said, "That day, Yin Se and Wei Guangming died together. When Pippi and I climbed the mountain, we saw a little girl kneeling on the ground and holding the ashes. That little girl was Sang Sang. I think she's a good girl, and I know that she will be with youngest brother." It was so quiet in the room that only the sound of the soft tip of the brush brushing the paper could be heard. In this silence, Chun Pippi's nervous voice suddenly sounded, "I also think Sang Sang is good." Eldest brother smiled with a complicated expression and looked at him. He said, "What do you think about her?" Chun Pippi thought for a moment and said seriously, "I can't tell, but I think she is good in every way." Eldest brother was slightly stunned and then shook his head and murmured, "Good in every way, good in every way." Eldest brother was naturally the leader of the back mountain of the academy. He was gentle and clean, so all the younger brothers and sisters were willing to be close to him. They were not afraid of him and were willing to listen to him. However, second brother was the rule of the back mountain. All the younger brothers and sisters were afraid of him and did not dare to oppose his opinion. In the past, it was easy for people in the back mountain to deal with second brother. Anyway, everyone listened to second brother, and then second brother had to listen to eldest brother. But they had never encountered such a situation. "I think what second brother said seems to be reasonable, although I don't understand what is holding the ashes. Then what eldest brother said doesn't make sense." "You can't say it like that. Both senior brothers have a point. My state of mind is not clear enough. How can I think of such an important matter more thoroughly than the two senior brothers? Therefore, whether it is eldest senior brother or second senior brother's words, I will just do as they say. Whichever girl they think is more suitable will be the most suitable." His deliberate interlude did not lighten the atmosphere in the room. Instead, it became a little awkward because of the silence of the two senior brothers. So the room became dead silent again. Eldest brother looked at second brother and said seriously, "Younger brother, there are many things you don't know." Second brother looked at him and said, "There are indeed many things I don't know. I don't know why you are hostile to Sang Sang. Is it because she is the successor of the great divine priest of light or something else? Senior brother doesn't want her to be with youngest brother at all. But senior brother, have you ever thought that this is unfair to the little handmaiden?" After a long silence, eldest brother said calmly, "I have no hostility to Sang Sang, but I admit what you said. I really don't want youngest brother to be entangled with her for the rest of his life." Second brother looked at his eyes and asked, "Why?" Eldest brother said, "There is no reason. It is just a feeling." Second brother said, "Senior brother, I have always believed in one principle in my life. Everything needs a reason." Eldest brother looked at him and said, "You don't need to know. Teacher knows." Second brother said, "Then why don't we wait for teacher to come back?" Eldest brother said, "Because the palace has sent the news." Second brother said indifferently, "If we don't agree, who dares to marry youngest brother?" Eldest brother frowned slightly. Second brother said, "I haven't seen senior brother frown for 10 years. Why do you frown? Do you also think there is something wrong with this?" Eldest brother was still frowning. He looked at him and shook his head. "That's because I find that after so many years, you still haven't grown up. You are still the hot-blooded young man who only knows to be stubborn and can't see the whole picture. Second brother said angrily, Teacher will never let us take another road in advance just because he saw some dangerous turns or shadows ahead of us. I believe that teacher will not punish the innocent in advance because of something that has not happened. So I think, senior brother, you are wrong today. People in the back of the mountain of the academy had never seen eldest brother and second brother disagree or even argue about something. What's more, the argument seemed to have developed into angry accusations. Everyone was shocked into silence. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, let alone speak. It was quiet, except for the sound of the soft tip of the brush gently sliding across the paper. Everyone looked at third sister, who was quietly drawing the hairpin-style, small, regular script in the corner of the room. Third sister of the back of the mountain of the academy liked to be quiet and hated to be active. She didn't talk at all and rarely interacted with her peers. But everyone knew that even the headmaster of the academy praised her profound knowledge and vision, so they hoped that she could resolve the current stalemate. There is one more chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 356. In such an oppressive atmosphere and quiet environment, even gazes seem to have become heavy. With so many gazes added together, the fine brush finally slowed down. The female professor, Yulien, glanced at the small regular script on the paper and nodded. She put the pen on the delicate small inkstone and then looked at the younger brothers and sisters who were looking at her expectantly. She was indeed the third sister of the academy who was praised by the headmaster of the academy. She only used one sentence to solve the never-before-seen dispute between the senior brothers in the academy and made a direct judgment on the debate between the two senior brothers. You are all wrong. Yulien looked at the eldest brother and second brother and said calmly, whether the calligraphy addict or the little maidservant is a good match for Ning-Kei, there is no answer. Because the word match stresses on each other's feelings. No matter how you insist on your own opinions, how can you know Ning-Kei's feelings? The second brother slightly frowned and said, Youngest brother is an orphan. He has no parents or relatives. The back of the mountain of the academy is like his home. Of course, his marriage should be decided by the headmaster or us senior brothers and sisters. Yulien smiled and said, That's why I said you were wrong. You don't understand youngest brother. I watched him climb the old library, vomit blood and pass out, and silently lose weight day after day by the window. I know what kind of person he is. Not to mention the palace's arranged marriage. Not to mention who our senior brothers and senior sisters want him to marry. Even if Master comes back and asks him to marry Hao Ian's daughter, he still won't agree if he doesn't want to. If he agrees, no one can object. She turned to the eldest brother and said calmly, You have to walk the road of life on your own to know the taste. So in the end, it is up to him to choose. No matter what he chooses, the price he will pay for it belongs to him, and he must learn to bear this price. I believe the headmaster will also hold the same view. After saying this, third sister Yulien packed up the ink, paper, and inkstone on the table and left the small courtyard without saying goodbye to the others. The loose academy uniform on her petite body swayed in the wind and disappeared into the night. In the previous academy debate, the eldest brother's words were hard to understand. The second brother's words were also vague. At this time, the third sister's words were also vague. They believed that the three of them could only vaguely feel something, so the others could not understand at all. The two senior brothers fell into silence. The younger brothers and sisters followed the third sister's footsteps and left quietly. Seventh sister Mu, you looked at the two sitting in the chairs worriedly. She filled the teapot on the table with hot water and then left the room. The candlelight gently swayed, and the faint sound of a waterfall flowing into a pond came from the back of the courtyard. After a while, the eldest brother stood up slowly. His clean eyes were full of tiredness. The second brother stood up and bowed respectfully. The eldest brother said, Since she said so, it seems that we are indeed wrong. But I still insist on my opinion. Moreover, I can't think of any reason why he wouldn't choose her since he and Shan are in love with each other. The second brother thought for a moment and said, because he can't let go of Sang Sang. The eldest brother suddenly thought of a possibility. He frowned and said, "Will the youngest brother want both of them?" The second brother said seriously, "Such greed will incur the wrath of heaven." Although the two girls are very different in status, they are not the vulgar women in the world. How can the youngest brother be so happy? The eldest brother looked at him quietly and suddenly asked, "Junimo, how much did you see?" The second brother said after a moment of silence, "When Yin Se and Wei Guangming turned into ashes, I saw the movement, but I still couldn't see it clearly." "Did you already see what would happen in the future?" The eldest brother smiled bitterly and said, "I'm afraid that even the headmaster couldn't see it, let alone you and me." The second brother frowned slightly and said, "I don't know how much Yulian saw. Her attention has always been on the youngest brother. I'm afraid she's not as good as you and me." After saying this, the eldest brother kept silent for a long time. Then he reached out and patted the second brother's shoulder gently and said, "Junimo, maybe you're right, but I can't bear to do it." Second brother was tall, so when he saw that Shi Xiang was going to pat his shoulder, he leaned forward out of habit so that Shi Xiang could pat him more easily. The ancient crown on his head almost hit to Shi Xiang's face. The two looked at each other and smiled. The negative emotions brought by the previous argument were all gone. Only the word "can't bear" was still echoing with the sound of the waterfall. Ning Ke didn't know that the back mountain of the academy held a meeting for his marriage. He also didn't know that the two senior brothers, who didn't want to mess with the world in his eyes, had a fierce conflict because of this matter. Recently, he continued to take Shan Shan to play in Chang'an City. The winter was gradually fading, and they went to various study rooms to appreciate the works of predecessors. In more than 20 years of his previous lives, he had never been in love. He didn't even have close contact with the opposite sex. Therefore, he didn't know whether he and Shan Shan were in love or not. After they said they liked each other on the red wall and white snow that night, the relationship between them didn't seem to change at all. It was still quiet and casual, and they didn't even hold hands. The only difference was that the girl occasionally revealed her shyness when their shoulders touched. It was this shyness that made up for most of the regrets Ning Ke had about love. When he took Shan Shan through the streets and alleys of Chang'an City, he often thought of the maidservant who leaned against him by the bonfire at the entrance of Northern Mountain Road and Sidu Ilan who strolled with him by the North Yen Lake. Only then did he understand that the source of his joy was a response. This feeling was really good, even if there was no intimate physical contact, sweet talk, or solemn vows. So Ning Ke was very willing to continue walking with Shan Shan. It was just that when they passed through the narrow alleys and the shadows of the winter trees, and when they stepped on the pine snow that was gradually melting by the lake, he would occasionally feel that somewhere in his heart had become a little empty. In the evening, the two walked to Lin 47th Street. Standing under the locust tree at the entrance of the alley, Ning Ke invited Mo Shan Shan again. "Come in and have a seat. There must be enough food." Mo Shan Shan looked at the door of the old brush pen shop not far away and said softly, "No need." Ning Ke was puzzled and asked why. Mo Shan Shan looked at the tips of her shoes sticking out of her skirt and said softly, "I was very happy to walk with you in Chang'an. I was also very happy to comment on those calligraphy and paintings with you. I was very happy that night when you said you liked me." Then she raised her head and looked at the inconspicuous dimple on Ning Ke's cheek. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly, and she suddenly raised her hand and gently poked it with the tip of her finger. She smiled and said, "But only liking me is not enough." After returning to the old brush pen shop, Ning Ke was still thinking about the meaning of Mo Shan Shan's words. If he was asked to solve mathematical problems or to comprehend the state of cultivation, it would probably be much easier than understanding what girls were thinking. Therefore, he was a little confused. "Young master, it's time to eat." Sang Sang scooped 2 bowls of chicken soup from a small urn and asked, "Do you want some chopped green onion?" Ning Ke said, "Your chicken soup is the best in the world, so you should drink it as it is. Don't add green onion." If it was in the past, Sang Sang would usually be happy to be praised by Ning Quebec. Although she might not smile, She would always press the spoon hard in the bowl when she refilled it for him. But today, she seemed not to hear it at all. She just refilled Ning K's bowl in silence, and then silently sat on the other side of the table and silently picked up the chopsticks. Ning K looked at her expression and suddenly realized that his whereabouts were indeed a little erratic these days. He smiled and explained, "I told you that night that those shameless senior brothers and senior sisters of the back mountain of the academy threw me into Chong in city as a hatchet man. So I've been waiting for someone to come and challenge me these days." Sang Sang softly nodded and then held the bowl and continued to eat. After Ning K finished the chicken soup, he poured 2 spoonfuls of white rice in the big bowl in front of him and then quickly ate the rice. It was quiet around the table. Ning K suddenly raised his head and looked at Sang Sang across the table. He said, "Since you were very young, we have been discussing what kind of sister-in-law we should find for you." Sang Sang gently put the bowl on the table and looked at him. She said, "It's young mistress. That's what I called her after we left the city of Wei." Ning K could not help laughing when he thought of the past, when he took Sang Sang to the house of red sleeves to choose girls. Then he finally understood why he always felt a little empty in his heart these days. It was because he had not heard someone's opinion, or he had not reported to someone, or he wanted to hear something he wanted to hear. He looked at Sang Sang and said seriously, "What do you think of Mo Shan Shan?" Sang Sang looked at his eyes very seriously. After a long time, she picked up the bowl again and said, "Very good." Ning K looked at the little girl who was about to bury her little face in the bowl and asked with a little surprise, "Very good?" Song Song's little face popped out of the bowl and looked at him. She said, "Very good." Ning K looked at her eyes that were as clear as a small pond, her hair that was as yellow as the grass after the snow, her small dark face, and the rice stuck on her face. He was silent for a long time, and then he smiled wordlessly. "It's nothing. I was just asking." He reached out to pick up the rice stuck on Song Song's face and threw it into his mouth skillfully. Then he lowered his head and continued to eat. Somehow, he felt a little depressed. He silently thought that Sang Sang was still a child. After dinner, Sang Sang boiled water and washed the dishes as usual, while Ning K began to write talismans. When he was tired and sleepy, he would casually write a few pieces of calligraphy to refresh himself. When it was late at night, he would warm his feet and get ready to go to bed. Although the midwinter was almost over, spring had not really arrived. Chang'an City was still a little cold at night. The two still slept on the brick bed built last winter, head to feet facing each other as in the past. Song Song's little feet were washed clean. Ning K held them in his arms. He felt very comfortable when he touched the pair of smooth, delicate, and white feet. He kissed them and then closed his eyes to fall asleep. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed to be a repeat of the night that Ning K and Sang Sang had spent in the past 15 years. It was just an ordinary night. However, Sang Sang did not fall asleep at all. She opened her bright eyes and quietly looked at the roof covered with waste talisman paper. It was as if she was looking at the rock wall of the cave in Min Mountain and the mud wall of the small courtyard in the city of Wei, where she used to live in the past years. Once I write about Sang Sang, I feel good. It seems that I really have to follow my fate. This chapter's title is great. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 357. In the middle of the night, before the rooster crowed, Sang Sang got up quietly. She put on the loose handmaiden uniform and the worn cotton shoes and walked out of the bedroom to the courtyard. She wiped the remaining snow on the edge of the well, filled the water tank in the kitchen with water, and put the firewood she chopped the day before in the corner. Then she picked up the broom, walked to the front of the shop, and swept the floor clean. Then she began to wipe the table and tidy up the scattered writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone. She squatted by the door and carefully checked whether there were any problems. These were the things she usually did every day, but today she was more focused and serious. She finished everything well. The sky in the east was already faintly showing some morning light. She squinted at the sky, walked out of the old brush pen shop, and went to the alley to buy 2 bowls of hot and sour noodle slice soup. Sitting at the table, Sang Sang quietly ate her own hot and sour noodle slice soup, and then washed her own bowl. She walked back to the bedroom and began to pack up her clothes. She took out the box from under the bed, divided the thick notes into two identical piles, and put the one that she thought belonged to her in her arms. She walked to the side of the Kong and looked at Ning Kei, who was still sleeping soundly. She slowly frowned and looked at him seriously for a long time. Then she picked up her luggage and left without any hesitation. The door of the old brush pen shop opened. The door of the old brush pen shop was closed. Because she had repaired it a few days ago, the door didn't make any sound and didn't alarm anyone. She carried her luggage and left silently. Her thin figure disappeared in the Lin 47th Street, where the night and the morning light converged. She never appeared again, as if she had never been here before. The Grand Secretary's mansion was quiet in the morning light. The dark and heavy door was closed tightly. The servants sweeping the floor outside deliberately controlled the friction between the broom and the ground. The towering winter trees in the mansion were silent. Sang Sang carried her luggage and walked to the door of the Grand Secretary's mansion. She said a few words to the vigilant servant, and then ignored him. She frowned and walked to the closed door and began to knock. It was unclear if it was because she was in a bad mood that day, but her small fist contained a great deal of force. Her fists landed on the thick and heavy door of the Grand Scholar's Manor, giving off a loud and muffled thud, sounding like the beating of a war drum. The sound of knocking on the door, which sounded like a war drum, woke up the people in the Grand Secretary's mansion. Curses and displeased inquiries could be vaguely heard behind the door. The servant who was sweeping the floor outside the Grand Secretary's mansion was scared to death. He quickly ran to the back of Sang Sang and was about to drive away this wild girl who came out of nowhere. However, the door was opened at this moment. "Second butler, I really didn't expect this wild girl to be so bold," the servant said with a sullen face. The sleepy second housekeeper rubbed his eyes and looked at the little handmaiden in front of him with a face full of displeasure. He waved his hand and was about to order someone to drive her away. However, he suddenly felt that this little handmaiden was a little familiar. He subconsciously rubbed his eyes again and finally woke up. He remembered the matter that had spread around the manor a few days ago. You are. Shao, because they got up in a hurry. Grand Secretary Xingjing and his wife were both wearing casual clothes. Not to mention washing up, even their hair was a little messy. However, when they looked at the little girl standing quietly in front of them, their emotions were even more chaotic. Sang Sang tightened the bundle on her right shoulder and looked down at her little shoes sticking out of her skirt. She said, "That day, you said that I was your daughter?" Mrs. Zeng nodded repeatedly, her face full of surprise. If it weren't for the Grand Secretary supporting her, she would have fainted on the ground in happiness. Sang Sang continued to look at the tips of her shoes. After a moment of silence, she said softly, "When I was a child, I heard, he told me about the law of the Tang Empire. Before marriage, the husband and wife have the responsibility to raise the children. That day, you asked me to move to the Grand Secretary's mansion. If it is to fulfill the responsibility stipulated by the law of the Tang Empire, can I move here?" "Of course you can." Mrs. Zeng held her hand in surprise and said, "This is your home. Of course you can come back to live." Grand Secretary Xingjing looked at the dark and thin little girl in front of him. He was happy but also confused. He thought of the day when he and his wife went to the shop to beg her to come back, but she refused and said that she wanted to live with her young master. As a Grand Secretary of the Imperial Court, he certainly knew what had happened after Ning Kei returned to Chang'an. He wondered what had happened to make her willing to come back and be his daughter. After all, he was the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Court and an elder who paid attention to the dignity of a father. Since Xingjing had already confirmed that Sang Sang was his daughter, he naturally asked her directly. Sang Sang raised her head and looked at the couple in front of her. She said seriously, "I don't like him anymore, so I don't want to live with him." Grand Secretary Zeng frowned slightly. He remembered that the Empress had reminded him and his wife not to break off their relationship. After a moment of silence, he said, "After all, you have been together for many years. Not to mention the relationship between master and servant. You have helped each other in the past. Even if you want to move back to the Grand Secretary's mansion, it seems that you should inform Ning Ke first. Sang Sang glanced at him and suddenly turned to walk out of the Grand Secretary's mansion. Mrs. Zeng was shocked. She hurriedly grabbed her and said in a trembling voice, "What's wrong?" Sang Sang looked at Grand Secretary Zeng quietly and did not speak. Mrs. Zeng was extremely flustered. She glared at the Grand Secretary and said angrily, "Don't talk nonsense if you don't know how to speak human language. If you make my poor child disappear again, I will not let you off." The Grand Secretary's mansion had always respected his wife. Although Zeng Jing did not think that what he had said was wrong, he was even more angry that Sang Sang ignored him as a father. But under his wife's murderous gaze, he could only shut up. Sang Sang looked at Mrs. Zeng and said, "I will live with you, not him." Mrs. Zeng was overjoyed and said, "As you wish. I will immediately ask someone to move your father's things to the study." When Ning Ke got up, he did not see Sang Sang. He put on a coat and walked to the courtyard to call for her. Sang Sang did not reply, so he stretched and walked to the kitchen. He found that Sang Sang did not light a fire or boil water. He could not help but shake his head. He walked to the front bed and saw the bowl of sour noodle slice soup on the table. How can I have breakfast without brushing my teeth? He looked at the bowl of sour and spicy noodle slice soup and thought with a frown. He had been used to a pair of small hands bringing a bowl of water and dental tools to him after he got up. Suddenly, he felt a little unaccustomed to having no one to serve him one day. Even if you're in a hurry to go out and buy the freshest bowl of soup, you have to help me wash my face and brush my teeth before you go out. Something's wrong. I've already bought the noodle soup. Where did you go? Ning Ke sat at the table and ate the sour and spicy noodle slice while thinking about where Sang Sang had gone. In the end, he guessed that her stingy habit had acted up again, and she insisted on going to the South Gate Market to buy fresh vegetables from farmers outside the city. It's only 2 or 3 copper coins cheaper. Is it worth it to get up so early in the morning and travel so far? After eating the sour and spicy noodle slice, Ning Ke laughed at someone as he walked back to the backyard with the dirty bowl. He threw the bowl beside the stove and felt a little sleepy, so he went back to sleep. He woke up again when the sky was bright. He rubbed his eyes and walked out of the house in his slippers. There was still no movement in the front bed or the backyard. He could not help but shout angrily, "Where's the hot water? Are you going to let me go out?" No one answered him. It was quiet in the front and backyard of the old brush pen shop. Ning Ke was startled and walked to the kitchen. The dirty bowl was still on the edge of the stove, and the stove was still filled with cold smoke. There was no firewood or fire, so it was naturally impossible for there to be any hot water. He walked to the wall of the courtyard and looked at the neat pile of fine firewood. He shook his head and sighed. Then he carried a small pile of fine firewood back to the kitchen and started to boil water. Although it had been many years since he had done any housework, he had been responsible for their lives in the past few years, so it was not difficult for him to start a fire and boil water. Not long after, the water in the pot began to emit steam. Ning Ke looked at the steam on the pot and suddenly felt that something was wrong. After the water was heated, he washed his face and, for some unknown reason, he washed the dirty bowl on the edge of the stove. If it were any other day, he would have gone to the academy or wandered around Chang'an. But today, he did not go anywhere. Instead, he silently walked to the front berth and sat in his armchair. Looking at the tables, chairs, and shelves that had been polished until they shone, and at the clean floor that had been swept clean, he began to stare blankly. He was silent by the table for a long time, and his face looked a little stiff. From time to time, people passed by in the alley. He would raise his head when they reflected on the door, but no one pushed the door open. No one pushed the door open. Ning Ke waited in silence until it was almost noon. He suddenly got up, opened the door, and walked out. He went to the Bianfeng in the eastern city to buy a roast duck and some vegetables in the market. Then he returned to the old brush pen shop. Sang Sang was still not in the shop. Ning Ke went into the kitchen after a moment of silence. He picked up the spatula and fried 2 plates of vegetables, steamed a pot of rice, peeled the roast duck, and put on the plate beautifully. Then he brought it to the front bed. 2 pairs of chopsticks, 2 big bowls of steaming white rice, and a sumptuous meal. Ning Ke looked at the meal on the table with satisfaction. He put his hands on his knees and continued to wait. However, after a long time, no one came back for lunch. There were still 2 pairs of chopsticks, but only one person, and the rice and vegetables were already cold. Ning-Kei stared at the meal on the table for a long time, and then he picked up the chopsticks and began to eat. However, for some reason, his hands were trembling. He tried for a long time, but he could not even pick up a single vegetable. He grabbed the chopsticks and wanted to throw them out, but he forcibly restrained himself and slowly put them on the table. He suddenly stood up and walked back to the bedroom in the backyard. He rudely lifted the bedboard, took out the box, and poured all the contents of the box on the bed. Looking at the fluttering notes, he finally confirmed that she had left by herself. Ning-Kei folded the notes again and put them into his arms expressionlessly. He took out the primordial 13 arrows from the sundry box in the corner and put them into his bag. He stuffed all the food papers into his sleeves, picked up the chopper beside the pile of firewood, and put it into his waist. Finally, he put the big black umbrella on his back and walked out of the old brush pen shop. He knew that Sang Sang should not be in danger, but he knew that this would be the most difficult battle he would face in his life. So he brought all the most important things with him. It seemed that this was the only way to comfort himself, that he would be able to find the most important thing in his life. If he could not find it, then there was no need for him to come back. This is the last chapter for today. The speed will slow down in the next few days. Everyone should know the reason. I'm writing the most important part of the plot. This kind of plot makes me nervous and vigilant, and I have to write it above 95 points to live up to my original intention of writing this book. So it will be slow, but I believe that it will definitely be good. That's good. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 358. With a chopper on his waist, an arrow box in his hand, and a big black umbrella on his back, Ning-Kei left the old brush pen shop and came to the street to start his journey to find Sang Sang. The first stop was the fake antique shop owned by Wu Lauer next door. He pushed the door open and asked directly, "Aunt Wu, have you seen my Sang Sang?" The old brush pen shop was now a legendary shop on Lin 47th Street. Many people knew that the shop was not a simple place because of the stories in the past year. Seeing Ning-Kei's expression, Aunt Wu felt a little scared. She shook her head and said, "No, I haven't seen her." Ning-Kei turned around and left without any hesitation. Then he came to a gambling house in West City and directly found Mr. Chi, the leader of the Fish Dragon Gang. "Have you seen my Sang Sang?" Mr. Chi said with a slightly strange expression. "I saw her when I sent the banknotes a few days ago, but I haven't seen her these days. What happened to Sang Sang?" Ning-Kei slightly frowned and asked, "What happened to her before?" Mr. Chi said, "Before you came back, she was asked by the Chong and local government once. No one knew what case she was involved in. It was the military that directly took action. I failed to stop it, but you don't have to worry too much. Sang Sang was not bullied and came out on the same day. Maybe the academy sent a message?" Ning-Kei didn't know about this. After a moment of silence, he thought it was more important to find her first. He looked at Mr. Chi and said seriously, "Ask the gang to look for her in Chang'an City. I owe you one." Mr. Chi said, "Don't worry. As long as she is still in Chang'an City, I will definitely find her." Ning-Kei was a little relieved. He thought that the Fish Dragon Gang was the biggest gang in Chang'an City and had the backing of the government. There were countless members in the gang, and they were densely scattered in the streets. No matter where Sang Sang hid, he would definitely find her. But then he thought that it had been a long time since the morning. What if Sang Sang had left Chang'an City? So he went to the palace. Seal the city gate of Chang'an City? Ning-Kei, are you crazy? Even the prime minister wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Even if you kill me, I can't do anything about it. I don't have that power, and I don't want His Majesty to think that I'm plotting a rebellion. Su Chongshan, the deputy commander of the bodyguards, was about to continue scolding Ning-Kei, who was lowering his head. However, he was deterred by Ning-Kei's murderous aura and hurriedly comforted him. "Don't worry. I'll send a letter to the Chong and local government to find him for you. Is that okay?" Ning-Kei looked up at him and said, "The Chong and local government doesn't have enough people. Can you help me issue an arrest warrant?" Su Chongshan gasped. He could tell that Ning Ke was about to go crazy today, so he did not dare to refuse directly. He explained in a low voice, "Your little handmaiden did not commit any crime. How could the Ministry of Penalty issue an arrest warrant?" Ning Ke took out a small portrait from his arms and put it on his chest. He said, "I'll report it now and say that she stole more than 10,000 taels of silver from the master's house. This should be enough for the Ministry of Penalty to issue an arrest warrant, right?" Su Chongshan took the portrait and looked at it. He thought that Ning Ke's drawing skills were much worse than his writing skills. When he was about to say something, he looked up and saw that Ning Ke had already walked out of the imperial city. He could not help but sigh. Looking at the back of Ning Ke, who was full of murderous aura, Su Chongshan sighed and shook his head. He thought that if anyone in Chang and saw Ning Ke in such a state of mind, that person would be courting death. Then he suddenly thought of a rumor in the imperial court and hurriedly chased after Ning Quebec. However, Ning Ke was too fast and disappeared in an instant. No one knew where he had gone. After the imperial court and the fish dragon gang blocked Song Song's escape route, Ning Ke continued his search in Chang'an. He went to the morning market in the south of the city, to Chinjinji Cosmetic Store, to the building of pines and cranes, and to the house of red sleeves, but he still could not find Sang Sang. However, everyone who saw him was stunned by the murderous aura of his weapons. It seemed that the murderous aura was about to tear the whole city apart. Finally, he went to the princess mansion and heard the answer he wanted to hear from Liu. However, the answer was completely out of his expectation, so he was at a loss for what to do. Ning Ke looked at Liu and asked, "Why didn't I know about this?" Liu looked at him and said sarcastically, "Maybe it's because someone has been busy spending time with a calligraphy addict in Chang in these days and has no time to care about what happened to his little handmaiden." Ning Ke looked at her and asked seriously, "Your Highness, are you mocking me?" "No." Liu looked at him and said coldly, "I am mocking you." Ning Ke asked why. Liu answered, "Because Sang Sang is my friend." After a moment of silence, Ning Ke said, "I see." The Grand Secretary's mansion of the Imperial Library was quiet today. The atmosphere in the study room was especially tense and oppressive. The source of all this tension was Ning Ke, who was standing in the study room. It came from his expressionless face and the dangerous aura he exuded. Zheng Jing, the Grand Secretary, had already given up his seat and the housekeeper had already served tea. However, Ning Ke did not sit down because he had been sitting at the table of the old brush pen shop for a long time today. He did not drink any tea because his mouth was already very bitter and he was not in the mood to chat at all. Ning Ke looked at the sleeping gear in the corner of the study and frowned slightly. He thought that the Grand Secretary slept in the study all year round. Didn't that mean that the relationship between the couple was not harmonious? Such a couple was not suitable for Song Song's parents. Moreover, this matter was a little strange. Why did Sang Sang suddenly have a pair of parents? In the past 10 years, he had never thought about what would happen to Sang Sang after she found her biological parents. Therefore, he felt a little strange and strangely nervous now. "First of all, I want to know if Sang Sang is in your mansion," he asked. Zheng Jing nodded and said with a smile, "Since she has recognized her, she should come back to live." Ning Ke asked directly, "You said that she is your daughter. Do you have any evidence?" Zheng Jing said sincerely, "To be honest, I do not have any solid evidence. But as the saying goes, mother and daughter are connected. My wife remembers some of Song Song's characteristics, and the timing matches. Therefore, I think this matter is definitely true." Ning Ke raised his head and said, "Please forgive me for not being in the mood to argue with the Grand Secretary's wife about the evidence. I only came to your mansion to do one thing, and that is to take her back." Upon hearing this, Zheng Jing slightly frowned. He thought that although Ning Ke's identity was extraordinary, he was a Grand Secretary of the Imperial Court. How could he allow Ning Ke to be so unyielding? He said unhappily, "How can you forcibly separate your own flesh and blood? Since Sang Sang is my daughter, how can she still be your maidservant?" After a moment of silence, Ning Ke said, "We could discuss this matter later. But first, shouldn't you let me see her? After all, she is still my maidservant." Zhang Jing frowned and said, "According to the law of the Tang Empire, it is up to the Chang and local government to decide whether she is your maidservant or not." Ning Ke looked at him and said, "Your Excellency, you'd better not forget that I am the head of the household. As long as I don't agree, no one can move her out. And if you have no evidence, I will still win the lawsuit in the Chang and local government." Zhang Jing frowned even more. Before he had time to respond, the Grand Secretary's wife, who had been waiting beside him with a smile on her face and suppressed her anger, broke out in advance. She angrily rushed to Ning Ke, pointed at his nose and scolded, "You are such an unscrupulous master. How can you let my daughter be your maidservant? Don't even think about it. Go to the Chang and local government for a lawsuit? My master is the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Library. He could just write a letter to the Imperial Library. Do you think that ugly Shangwan would dare to give my daughter back to you?" Ning Ke was already at a loss when he heard that Sang Sang suddenly had another biological parent. He had some unspeakable fear in his heart. Now that he was scolded by the Grand Secretary's wife, his fear turned into anger. He looked at the woman in front of him and said in a low voice, "Madam, you probably don't understand. I, Ning Ke, am the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy and a student of the second floor of the academy. I have sat in the imperial study and had tea in the princess's mansion. If you dare to write a letter to the Chang and local government, I can ask His Majesty to write a decree to investigate whether Your Excellency is corrupt or not." Hearing this naked threat, Grand Secretary Zhang Jing suddenly changed his expression. He angrily slammed the table and stood up. He pointed at Ning Ke's nose and scolded, "Young man, you are so unreasonable." Ning Ke was not moved at all. He looked at the couple and said calmly, "The academy teaches us to use our fists. Grand Secretary, you should understand that if you push me too hard, I will directly burn down your mansion and hide in the back of the mountain of the academy. Where can you go to judge me then?" At this moment, the bamboo curtain of the study moved and a thin figure walked out. "You don't have to be afraid of him. The princess will definitely side with me, and he can't do anything if I want to come back to live. As for the academy, Mr. Second has promised me that he won't let him bully me. If he dares to burn down this mansion, I will complain to Mr. Second, and Mr. Second will definitely burn him down." Sang Sang walked to Mrs. Zhang and said to Ning Ke expressionlessly. Ning Ke looked at her dark little face and was startled. Then he smiled with mixed emotions. He felt like he had flown out of the cliff and finally caught the pine tree. His legs suddenly became weak, and he almost sat on the ground. From early morning to now, from the old brush pen shop to the Grand Secretary's mansion, he had gone to many places today. He was extremely nervous and exhausted, both mentally and physically. Now that he finally saw her, the nervousness and exhaustion relaxed into a feeling of collapse. It was good to see her, because once he saw her, he would not be able to run away. At this time, Ning Ke finally relaxed and recalled the fear in his heart for the whole day. Thinking of that terrible feeling, he could not help but give birth to a flame-like anger, mixed with a completely inexplicable jealousy, and finally turned into countless words that gushed out. "Not bad. You have found your biological parents and can fly now. Mr. Second, you even have a backer in the academy. I was scolded by Li Yu in the princess mansion. Do you want me to go back to the back of the mountain and be beaten by a second brother before you can vent your anger? TSK, you are indeed the miss of the Grand Secretary's mansion. You actually dare to play the trick of moving the curtain and sending the beauty. It's a pity that you are not fair enough. You are not a beauty. You are just a little person." His word could be said to be extremely sarcastic. Anyone who heard it would probably be angry and start a fight with him. Mrs. Zhang was so angry that she covered her chest. However, Song Song's little face was still expressionless. She only looked at Ning Ke's eyes and said very calmly, "What does it have to do with you? Today's chapter can only be said to have barely passed. There is something wrong with my brain. However, I have thought it through. Tomorrow's chapter will definitely be very exciting. Let me add that the night of the exam is a comedy. Everyone, don't be too serious. Boo-hoo. I heard that some students who are taking the college entrance exam tomorrow are actually waiting for the update. Damn, I am so angry. Be careful that I don't wake you up like how Ning K beat up Sang Sang. Go to sleep. I have not updated much these few days, so you don't need to read it. I wish everyone a smooth exam. Yi Tianxing, Fan Xian, Su Lu, possess me. It's best to transform into Ning K. Damn, I found out that all I wrote are exam-oriented education geniuses. Come on, everyone. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 359. Ning K had never hit Sang Sang since she was 4 years old. From that day on, he was always on the losing side in countless battles with Sang Sang. For example, at this moment, Sang Sang dissolved all the sarcasm in Ning K's words with just one sentence and turned it into a bolt of lightning, which made him stiff all over and filled his heart with endless resentment. What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? Why does your business have nothing to do with me? The more Ning K thought about it, the angrier he became. He was so angry that he trembled like Mr. Wu next door. He rolled up his sleeves and searched around the study of the Grand Secretary's mansion, like an ant on a hot pan. He wanted to find a small wooden stick and find a beautiful life before Sang Sang was 4 years old. However, there was no wooden stick in the study, and their life could not go back to the time before she was 4 years old. Even if he found it, he could not really take off Sang Sang's pants and slap her, but... So after a while, he walked back to Sang Sang helplessly and said with his head down, "Come back with me." Sang Sang whispered no. Ning K raised his head and stared into her eyes, asking, "Why not?" Sang Sang answered softly, "Because I'm not happy living there." "Why not?" "It doesn't make sense. I'm just not happy." "You're not unreasonable. You're just brainless. What does it have to do with you?" Ning K said angrily, "I'm the young master, and you're my little handmaiden. Of course it has to do with me." Sang Sang lowered her head and said, "You asked me to call you young master after we came to Chang'an." Ning K sighed softly and said sadly, "I raised you since you were little." Sang Sang raised her head and said seriously, "Not yet. After you were 8 years old, I was responsible for washing clothes, cooking, and all the housework. So I raised you." Ning K had been preparing his emotional attack for a long time, but it was interrupted coldly at the beginning. He did not even have the chance to say anything like poop or pee. This feeling was very uncomfortable, as if he choked on hot and sour noodle slice soup. He suddenly realized that Sang Sang was not a person from the city of Wei, nor was she a senior brother or sister from the academy. She was the person who knew him best in the world and would not be deceived by his simulated emotions. His best tricks were useless against her. He said angrily, "I earned the money, didn't I?" Sang Sang frowned and said, "But it was my idea to earn money. If I hadn't forced you to sell your calligraphy after we came to Chang'an, we would still be poor." Ning K's mind was not clear at this time, so he did not hear the word we. Otherwise, he would have been more confident. But because he did not hear it, he was full of grievances and sorrow. He thought about how hard he had hunted in Min Mountain, killed the horse gang at Shubi Lake, and risked his life to kill people with Chow Shao Shu. Although it was to repay Darky's kindness, it was also to earn more money for the family. In fact, he knew very well why Sang Sang ran away from home. It had nothing to do with her finding her biological parents or anything else. After a moment of silence, he continued to roll up his sleeves. Sang Sang continued to look down at the tips of her shoes. Mrs. Zeng was shocked, thinking that he was going to hit her daughter. She gritted her teeth and rushed over, wanting to knock him to death or herself. Zeng Jing hurriedly pulled his wife back. He frowned and looked at Ning K and Sang Sang in the study. He felt that the relationship between the two of them was not the master-servant relationship he had imagined. What was even more amazing was that the two of them seemed to be in harmony even though they were arguing. It was as if they were a complete world that no one could separate. Yes, when Ning K and Sang Sang were together, they were a world. This was a world where people were used to helping each other and never thought of forgetting each other in Jianghu. Now, this old world finally had a crack and was about to split or recombine. The rules of the world were about to change, but no one knew whether it would change in the direction of light or darkness, or whether there would be a big explosion and create a completely new world. Ning K looked at Sang Sang and said seriously, We have to make things clear. No matter what, I will definitely get married. We can't live like this for the rest of our lives. Sang Sang looked at him and frowned slightly, as if she felt that he had said something wrong. Sorry, I was too nervous and said it wrong. Ning Ke patted his head and said again, there is no doubt that the two of us will live together for the rest of our lives. Then he continued, but I still have to get married. I know that it will be hard for you to accept it for a while. I understand how you feel now, Sang Sang suddenly asked. You said that we will definitely live together for the rest of our lives. Ning Ke answered matter-of-factly, of course. Sang Sang said, then you will get married. Ning Ke nodded. Sang Sang said, if you get married, you will live with someone else for the rest of your life. Then how will you live with me? This was indeed a problem, but it was not a problem for the thick-skinned Ning Quebec. He answered with a smile, even if we get married, we can still live together for the rest of our lives. Sang Sang looked back at Zheng Jing's wife and asked, are there any ministers whose sons are not married? Zheng Jing's wife had been shocked by the previous conversation between the two of them. As the wife of an official in the imperial court, she had never seen such a master-servant relationship. When she suddenly heard her daughter's question, she did not come back to her senses for a moment. She answered subconsciously, many officials' mansions are choosing. Sang Sang looked back at Ning Ke and said, then I will marry them. Ning Ke was stunned. He was a little annoyed, but he was also a little shy because of this annoyance. When all of these gathered together, they became shameful and angry. He scolded, how old are you? What marriage? Sang Sang said, I heard that in the Great River Kingdom, people can get married at the age of 14. Hearing the three words, Great River Kingdom, Ning Ke felt that he had lost half a head. His boldness was immediately deflated. He tried to persuade her gently, but we are in Chang'an. Sang Sang said, even in Chang'an, I can get married in another year when I turn 16. Ning Ke was stunned and said angrily, you are dark and thin, and you have been a handmaiden for more than 10 years. Do you think those rich young masters will be willing to marry you? Sang Sang stared into his eyes and said, I am the daughter of a first-class Grand Secretary, a friend of Her Highness, a disciple of the great divine priest of light, and Mr. Second of the Academy dotes on me. I have tens of thousands of silver notes in my hands. Why do you think those people are not willing to marry me? Ning Ke trembled with anger and said, it's okay if you don't mention the silver notes. Now that you mention them, I am so angry. You actually divided the silver notes. Do you really want to separate from the family? Sang Sang reminded him, we're discussing about my marriage. Ning Ke waved his arms hard and said firmly, you are not allowed to marry. After he said these three words, the study of the Grand Secretary's mansion was silent. Zheng Jing and his wife had complicated expressions, while Sang Sang just looked at Ning Ke silently. Ning Ke put down his arms in embarrassment. Ning Ke looked at her eyes and finally knew that Sang Sang had grown up. She was no longer the little girl who followed him around and learned to talk. Once she grew up, she could not go back. The little girl would become a little girl, then a little girl, then a little girl, and finally a little woman. This was an irreversible process, so she had to start thinking about what would happen after she grew up, whether it was happiness or sadness. Little girls had to get married when they grew up. Could he just watch Sang Sang marry someone else? No matter if it was a skinny little girl or a young girl, or a bloated and nagging girl after marriage, or a white-haired girl lying on the bamboo chair. As long as she was Sang Sang, he could not watch her marry someone else. If he did not allow her to marry, then why should she watch him marry someone else? Ning Ke lowered his head. He was a little helpless, a little flustered, a little confused, and a little bit understanding. He understood how Sang Sang felt when she left home in the morning. He understood how he felt. However, understanding was not enough. Ning Ke's body stiffened when he thought of another sentence he heard last night. He bowed to Zheng Jing and his wife respectfully and asked them to give him and Sang Sang some space to talk alone. Zheng Jing and his wife looked at each other and sighed as they walked out of the study. I can't lie to you. I really like her. Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang, who lowered her head and said, you don't have to ask me. I know what you want to ask. When I was a child, I did say that I liked those girls when I peeked at them bathing. When I saw Dewdrop and Lu Xue in the House of Red Sleeves, I also said that I liked them. But She is different. I really like her. Sang Sang looked down at her feet in silence. Ning Ke continued, and I asked you about her. You also said that she was very nice. Sang Sang raised her head and said, She's indeed very nice. Ning Ke said, But you don't like her. Sang Sang said, Very nice doesn't mean that I have to like her. Ning Ke asked, Then why don't you like her? Sang Sang looked at him and said seriously, I don't like that you like someone else. The study was silent for a long time. Ning Ke said in a low voice, But I have already told her that I like her. Just like many times in the past few years, he was used to getting advice or even spiritual support from Sang Sang when he encountered a really difficult problem. However, he forgot one thing. This problem involved Sang Sang herself. There was no emotion on Sang Sang's little face. There was no anger, and no crying. She looked at him and said expressionlessly, I'm hungry. I'm going to sleep. You can go. She was hungry, so she needed to sleep. This sentence was illogical. Ning Ke looked at her and said, I can't sleep well when you're not at home. Sang Sang did not say anything. Ning Ke said, Then who will cook noodles for me when I'm hungry? Sang Sang did not say anything. Ning Ke suddenly said, How about I cook noodles for you? Sang Sang still did not say anything. After a long silence, Ning Ke said, I'll go and calm down first. I'll pick you up tomorrow. After saying this, he turned and walked out of the study. Sang Sang walked to the door of the study and looked at Ning Ke, who was walking to the flower bed. She said, The eggs are in a rice jar in the kitchen. Don't use too much oil when you fry them. This chapter is probably the one that I have revised the most in my life. I have gone back and forth countless times and deleted a lot of warm memories. I try to make it as clean and transparent as possible, with details and atmosphere. This is the upper limit of my ability. Please don't dislike it, just like it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 360. Ning Ke returned to the old brush pen shop and found that the door did not creak when he pushed it open. Then he remembered that it was Sang Sang who had fixed it. He walked into the kitchen and reached into the rice jar to take out a few eggs. Then he remembered that this was the method he had taught Sang Sang when they were young. He walked to the water jar and prepared to boil noodles. Looking at the full water jar, he remembered that Sang Sang had finished all the housework before she left home in the morning. He walked out of the kitchen and stood silently in the courtyard for a long time. He still had the black umbrella on his back, the arrow box in his hand, and the hatchet at his waist. For the whole day, he had been running and standing. He did not sit down, drink a cup of tea, or eat anything. But at this time, he was not in the mood to cook noodles. He was only thinking about his own matters. The neat pile of firewood in the corner and the clean table and chairs in front of him evoked many memories. As for what exactly he recalled, only he knew. Without Sang Sang, every corner of the house had a sense of desolation. He couldn't get used to it. He couldn't help but think that he was already so lonely in just one day. How did Sang Sang spend her time alone at home during the half a year when she left Chang and for the wilderness? There was a cat lying on the wall. The cat looked up at the stars in the night sky. Ning Ke glanced at it, pulled out a piece of firewood from the pile at the foot of the wall, and threw it over. The cat, who was pretending to be lonely, was disturbed. It turned its head and screamed angrily at him, then jumped off the wall and disappeared. Without Sang Sang's house, there was no smell of smoke and fire, and there was a chill everywhere. Ning Ke could not stay in such a house, so he left. Ning Ke went to the guest yard first. The disciples of the Black Ink Garden of the Great River Kingdom lived here. Shan Shan also lived here. There was a large bamboo forest in the guest court. Even though it was winter, it was still faintly green. At this time, when it was illuminated by the light at night, it seemed even more tranquil. Ning Ke did not enter the guest court. He stood between the fake rocks of Jean Mountain opposite the gate of the court, silently looking at the light and the figure in the light. His eyesight was very good, and he could vaguely see the silhouette of a girl by the window in the deepest wing room. She was concentrating on writing something. Was he writing the name Ning Ke, which was difficult to write well? She quietly looked at the girl's silhouette by the window for a long time. Then he turned and left, heading south of the city. south of Chang and City, at the Yinming Lake at the foot of Yinming Mountain. Ning Ke stood by the lake and looked at the surface of the lake in silence. The ice on the surface of the lake had long melted. But because winter was still around, the ice did not completely disappear. Instead, it turned into something like willow catkins. Under the illumination of the distant lights on the opposite shore, it looked like countless soft, golden threads. Thump! Thump! He picked up a stone and threw it at the dim money on the lake, piece by piece, until all the ice in front of him was smashed into pieces. Previously, he had used firewood to smash wild cats, and now he was using stones to smash ice floss. It was not because of anything else, but because he was very unhappy. He felt that his world had been destroyed beyond recognition, so he would not allow others to hide in their own world and secretly laugh at him. Throwing the last stone in his hand to the ground, Ning Ke held his waist and panted for a long time before he calmed down. Looking at Yinming Lake under the night sky, he complained in a slightly hoarse voice, "The eggs are in the rice jar. Put less oil when frying them? You're not even here anymore. Why do you care how much oil I put when I fry eggs? Is there anyone as stingy as you? The eggs are in the rice jar, and the water is in the water jar. Why don't you say the rice is in the pot? Where are you? What do you mean by you're supporting me? I've killed the horse gang and robbed the hunters. I've done all the evil things in my life. I've painstakingly robbed some silver, and I've given it to you. In the end, you're the one supporting me? Don't say that I spend a lot of money. Did I drink when I was in the city of Wei? Gambling, it was indeed gambling, but wasn't it also to increase the family's income? What did you see me drinking and whoring? When did I ever give money when I visited the brothels in Chang'an? Are you still not satisfied?" Ning Ke looked at the big lake under the night sky, held his waist, and stretched out his index finger. Like a shrew, he scolded angrily. "What do you mean I can't marry you even if you don't let me? Tell me clearly. What are you trying to do? You little girl, what do you want? Tell me clearly. You're asking me if I've ever thought about marrying you? Well, I admit that sometimes I've thought about marrying you when you grow up. But you're still a little girl. It's okay to think about it. But can you really say it? If I really say it, what if you're so shy that you want to chop me with a chopper? Even if you don't chop me, who knows how many people want to chop me? And even if I want to marry you, it won't affect me from liking other people, right? Why should I like others? Hey, I like to eat meat, but it doesn't mean I don't like to eat shrimp. Humans are omnivores. I like to eat more, so what? What can you do to me? Then what about you? You eat with me. What did you say? I like women. Are you going to like women with me? Well, it doesn't seem to make sense. The hoarse voice kept ringing in the quiet lake. In the Grand Secretary's mansion, such a conversation would never happen, because Ning Ke did not dare to say these words to Sang Sang. He knew that if he really said so, the stubborn girl would definitely turn around and leave, not giving him any chance to save the situation. And Sang Sang would definitely not ask those questions. But he knew what she wanted to ask. So he could only stay at the foot of Yinming Mountain in the middle of the night by the quiet lake. He could not understand and could not refute the lake water. His voice startled the lake birds. The Grand Secretary's mansion was quiet at night. The lady's boudoir, which had been prepared a few days ago, was decorated luxuriously. Her makeup box was filled with cosmetics from Chin Jinji Cosmetics Store. Sang Sang used to love cosmetics from Chin Jinji Cosmetics Store. But today, she did not even look at them, nor did she pay attention to the complicated greetings of the maids. She just looked at the bronze mirror silently. The bronze mirror was very smooth, and there were complicated flowers and plants engraved on the side. One look, and anyone could tell that it was an expensive item. Sang Sang did not look at the bronze mirror. She only looked at the face in the mirror. It was a small, slightly tanned face. Her brows and eyes were plain and unremarkable. Her hair was clearly a little yellow and soft, due to malnutrition. Her pair of bright willow leaf-shaped eyes had also become a little dim. No matter how one looked at it, this small face could not be considered beautiful. It could not even be considered delicate. "You're really ugly." Sang Sang looked at herself in the mirror and said. From hearing Ning Ke's words last night, to leaving the old brush pen shop in the morning, to meeting Ning Ke again in the afternoon, she did not cry. She did not even show any expression of sadness. because she had been reminding herself not to cry, no matter what. Those weak and slender young ladies could hold flowers and shed tears because they were beautiful. But even though you were weak, you were so ugly. Well, why do you have to cry? Sang Sang rarely looked in the mirror because she did not care about her appearance other than being white. And because Ning Kei, as a man, did not know how to dress up a little girl. When they were in Min Mountain, the little girl would occasionally look at her face in the still water in the stream. When they were in the city of Wei, the little girl would wash her face and comb her hair in a wooden basin. When they came to Chang, and Ning Kei bought her a powder box, and she finally had a mirror. But the mirror in the box was too small, and it was difficult to clearly reflect the whole face. So Sang Sang felt that the small dark face in the bronze mirror was a little strange. She felt that the person in the mirror was a little strange. She suddenly felt that the person in the mirror was a little strange. Sang Sang shook her head and said, "You are really a very annoying child." Sang Sang in the bronze mirror lowered her head and said, "Why do you say that?" "Because you make him worry. I want to make room for him to get married. But you clearly know that he will not leave you alone, so you're forcing him to make a choice. He has been good enough to you. How can you be so cruel?" But he said that he will spend the rest of his life together. Since he said that he will spend the rest of his life together, can one more person be together? Can he spend the rest of his life with one more person? Why do you have to fight with others? Sang Sang in the bronze mirror answered sadly, "But it was originally mine." Sang Sang outside the bronze mirror said silently, "But he will be very sad. I have never fought with others, but this time is different. Even if he will be sad, even if I become an annoying child, even if I become uglier, I will still fight with him." Outside the bronze mirror, Sang Sang wiped away the tears on her face and said stubbornly like a child. The morning light was bright, and the lake at the foot of Yinming Mountain reflected a faint luster. Ning Kei stood by the lake, holding his waist and panting tiredly. From time to time, he muttered a few words. He had not eaten or drank for a whole day and night, and he had cursed at the lake for a whole night. His throat was already extremely dry, and his face was very haggard. Youngest uncle used to curse the heavens and the earth, and he was so heroic and magnificent. You curse at this small lake, what can you feel? What's more, you are still struggling with those small things. A voice sounded in the forest by the lake. Ning Kei turned to look at the fat man and said angrily, "You have been sexually abused since childhood, so you have a psychological shadow. How would you know that the relationship between a man and a woman is the real important thing?" Chun Pippi shrugged and said, "I know you are in a bad mood. I will not argue with you." Ning Kei asked, "Why are you here?" Chun Pippi said, "Because of a certain matter, the academy held a big meeting. In the end, everyone quarreled, but came to no conclusion. In the end, Seventh Sister said that they should take you back for interrogation to see what you really think. But you didn't go to the academy yesterday, so everyone sent me to catch you." Ning Kei's thoughts were very chaotic at this time, and he did not understand what he was trying to say. He thought about the question that he had been thinking about for a whole night, and looked at Chun Pippi seriously and asked, "I have something to ask you. What do you like to eat? Crab porridge?" Chun Pippi touched the back of his head and asked, "Why do you ask?" Ning Kei said, "I like eating noodles with fried eggs the most, but if you eat crab porridge every day, will you get tired of it?" Chun Pippi thought for a moment and replied, "How can I not get tired of eating it all the time?" Ning Kei frowned and suddenly thought of a more suitable metaphor. He asked in a slightly hoarse voice, "What about water? Will you get tired of drinking water?" Chun Pippi said angrily, "What bullsh**t question is that? If I don't drink water, I will die. Tomorrow is Saturday off. Have a good weekend." To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.